Hey, hey, welcome to The Breakdown. I am your host, Ivahka Glass. I want to thank Cheem for the intro music. It's the instrumental to World Star. So thank you, Cheem. Shout out Sam Naz. But yeah, welcome to The Breakdown, a Music Mondays podcast. I am joined in this extensive episode by A Place for Owls. There is a little bit of me on their takes because they had to use a phone because there was multiple people in one place. But nonetheless, it's a pretty good episode. Not pretty good. It's fantastic. It's lengthy. Everything you want to know about A Place for Owls, self-titled A Place for Owls, is in this episode. So without further ado, here is the episode. So Place for Owls, how you doing?
Good.
Great.
Greetings. How are you?
Great.
I'm doing good. Who do I have here from A Place for Owls again?
You have Ben, I am Ben, and I play guitar and vocals in A Place for Owls.
Primary songwriter.
Yeah, primary songwriter, but we're democratic in style.
Hey, I'm Daniel. I play guitar and sing a little bit.
I'm Jesse. I play drums and guitar and vocals sometimes.
All right. So, let's start with how long did y'all take to make this album?
Say again.
Your self-titled. How long did y'all take to make your self-titled album, A Place for Owls?
Probably 2 to 2.5 years. It was the songs. A lot of them were written in mid 2020. So at the start of the pandemic, when sort of like the pandemic first hit Denver in like March or April of 2020, I almost immediately got let go. My wife and I we lost our jobs the same week, and we ended up being unemployed for like 4 or 5 months. And during that period of unemployment, and it's like shut down, so it's literally like we can't leave the house or whatever. So I wrote in that first like month to 6 weeks, I wrote like 40 songs, and some of them were good, and we used the good ones to go on our first LP. So the songs were written like early pandemic days, and then we, over the course of 2021, actually tracked the record, arranged it, and then took a really long time to mix it because we did the whole thing ourselves. Jesse here is one of our engineering-minded, producer-minded people, and so he can speak to the recording process.
Yeah, we basically took the whole year of 2021. So 2020, we released our acoustic EP, which was actually born out of pre-production for LP1. The idea was we were going to take all these songs that we love to play really like loud and fast and with full band arrangement, and then play them acoustic to make sure that they actually worked. That's one of our secret producer tricks, is like if the song doesn't hold up played acoustic, then it's probably not actually that great of a song. So in that process, we discovered that there were a handful of songs that we actually liked the acoustic version better. So in the middle of pre-production for LP1, we recorded an acoustic EP, which then sidelined LP1 for about another 6 to 8 months. So we started tracking LP1 at the end of 2020. We tracked all the drums and bass live. Mm-hmm. Ryan and I have played in bands together for over 10 years at this point. So whenever we can, we really like to play stuff live. And so we did all the drums and bass over, I think, 3 sessions total. And from there, we basically just pieced stuff together as we had time. We kept rearranging songs. We would change how we wanted parts to go. But we spent most of 2021 tracking the record. I think the final little bits and bobs were done early 2022, but we basically took 6 months to to do the mix after we finished everything. We really wanted it to feel right. So yeah, Ben's pretty much dead on. It was like 2.5 years start to finish from conception to release.
All right, and then y'all had that come out. That was in August. So
Yeah.
y'all
Yep.
had. Wow, that was quite some time to be working on that album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you have
Bunch
it?
of
How
bunch
long
of
did you
dudes
have
with
it done,
full-time
though?
jobs.
Yeah. We all have day jobs, and we all have families or significant others or whatever, and so we like are weekend warriors and evening warriors, right?
Okay.
And so the whole record came together at like late night Thursday, Friday, Saturday night sessions we recorded it most in like the dead of winter. So like I have some very strong positive, but like very strong visceral memories of like singing myself hoarse until like 4:00 in the morning and then stumbling out of where we record, and it's just so freezing outside. So like the record definitely feels like a fall sort of winter experience to me.
A lot of brown drink consumed
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
in the process. And a fun note, the real Twitter heads will know, but Ben actually tracked all of his lead vocals for the album in one day. Like
Yeah.
one session, 1, 2, very rarely 3 takes. But the idea really was to not overthink the vocals, because usually we'll do a number of takes and comp it till it sounds right, or work until we get exactly the right harmony. And we wanted the lead vocal to be a little more visceral than that. And so, yeah, basically you can hear, this is one of our favorite things about the album, but as it progresses, we tracked it in order. So you can hear Ben's voice start to deteriorate the further into the record you go, which is a fun little tidbit.
That is, if this was not an audio only podcast, the audience would have saw my jaw just go agape to record, because it's 12 songs.
Yeah.
It's 42 minutes. Y'all have a full length album.
And
Yeah.
we cut
You
2
aren't-
songs.
Yeah.
We actually cut 2 songs from it as well. So Ben recorded
Oh.
14 songs in about 14 hours.
Yeah.
That is astounding.
Yeah. Well, you talked about it being an album. Like probably a lot of bands that you talk to will sort of go back and forth on like, okay, in the age of streaming, do people care about LPs anymore, like records? You know, there seems to be this pressure to like just do a bunch of singles and like release a single like every 3 months or something, just to kind of keep everybody's ADD attention. And I grew up with cassette tapes and CDs, and like an album was an experience that you had to sort of listen to front to back. And so I wanted an album, you know, and I wanted like I don't want to throw any shade on bands that are like putting out 7 or 8 song LPs or whatever, but I'm like, bro, if it's not 10 songs or more, I don't know if that's an LP by me.
So y'all are traditionalists.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gatekeeping purists of album culture.
Hey,
Bunch of assholes. Yeah.
Just
Somebody has to do it.
unreasonable,
Yeah.
stuck in our ways.
Yeah.
The debate on whether it's an LP or an EP, it truly is insignificant in the long run. It's just like, did you put out a collection of music? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
I agree with that.
I have a soft boundary at like 7 songs makes it an EP, 8 songs makes it an album, but that's just because I grew up listening to Metallica, and all like early Metallica is like it's an hour-long album and there's 8 songs, you know, and so that's just my personal history speaking into it, and less of an actual hard and fast rule.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. And then, so I forgot to ask, y'all are from Denver, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Denver,
All
Colorado.
right.
We're all from elsewhere, but gathered and met in Denver, we me and Jesse and Ryan, who Jesse's our drummer, Ryan's our bassist. We met a few years back and started playing as a three-piece. And then we added on Daniel, Daniel and I have known each other since like freshman year of college. And so we've been playing guitar since we were like babies together. But he joined the band after, and then we became a four-piece, did the acoustic EP. And then Nick, who recorded and produced the acoustic EP, we just liked his musical sensibility so much, we just straight asked him to join the band. And so now Nick, who's not here on the podcast, but Nick is he's like our secret sauce, basically.
It really does feel like we conned him into this because he's like, he was super happy to work with us on the EP and kept saying how much he loved our music. And the whole time we're just like, yes, keep drinking the Kool-Aid so we can actually just like, we'll just steal you from any other musical ideas you might have. And then you'll just belong to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Nick plays in our band. He plays lead guitar. He's saxophone, glockenspiel, like basically anything weird and additional.
He's the best guitarist in our band. He's the best vocalist in our band.
So
he's
true.
Far and away the best keys player in our band.
Yeah. And he's probably the best songwriter in our band, even though like I'm the primary songwriter. Nick, he's been recording his own like solo album for like the last 2 years as well. And we have me and our band, we've like delayed and like his solo project. So we kind of feel bad.
Sorry, Nick.
But we're like, whatever, baby, we love you. Like, be in our band. So yeah, Denver is where we're based. But I talked about the band, I guess, as a result of that question.
You know, this is the perfect space for just like talking about Denver and then going into the band because that's information I wanted to know.
Yeah. Yeah, Denver.
Your secret sauces.
Yeah. Denver is a cool but kind of interesting scene. There's a lot of bands that we've really resonated with, and Denver has got a tradition for emo music. You know, like I was reading in the Dan Ozzi's Sellout book that like Jimmy Eat World played with what was the like Jimmy Eat World's first like big show was in Denver. The cover of Static Prevails is a rooftop in Denver, Colorado. So we've been learning that there's like actually like a history of really good emo from Denver and sort of that's happened in Denver. But it's also like it's a city that is not necessarily accessible to get to from the West Coast or the Midwest or the East Coast. And so like one of our favorite bands is, Camp Trash.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of our favorite bands is Camp Trash, and we've been begging them. They've gone on like 4 tours in the last year and a half or whatever, and they've hit Denver once. And we just like keep begging them. And Keegan from Camp Trash is basically like, Denver is so far away from everything else, and it makes it so hard to get to. So we feel like Denver is kind of an advantage in some ways because we're like one of a few emo sort of punky bands in our genre. And that way you can sort of start making waves and feel like you're getting noticed because it's not like a big pond for emo music. But at the same time, it's like some of our favorite national bands that we would want to play with, they're never coming through Denver. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
You do have to, I will have to say, you should be grateful you got to play with String Machine just last week, right?
Yes, hell yeah. They're Hallelujah Hell Yeah is like one of my favorite records of the year, and that was just such a dream. Them and Orson Welles are the sweetest dudes.
And they both absolutely slayed, and it was mind-boggling to me that there were so few people in the room.
Yeah, well, it was for a Colorado Springs show. It was a really well attended.
That's
show.
true.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that was not in Denver. That was in Colorado Springs, which is about 45 minutes to an hour south of us, and may as well be a different.
Yeah, but String Machine, that was one of those. There's so many things that are just good that happen from Twitter, and that was one of those experiences where we would not have had the opportunity to play with this really kick-ass band that put out one of our favorite records of the year without the internet.
Absolutely, because they're from God,
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Pittsburgh. I was about to say Philly, but they're from Pittsburgh.
Yes.
So
Yeah, don't let them hear you say that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Pretty
No.
much every. Sometimes think about relocating to Pennsylvania because like every time I discover a new band that I love, they're either from Philly or Pittsburgh.
yeah, that seems to be the case. Or Florida.
Yes, 100%. Florida, Southern California also has a tremendous shout out to Aren't We Amphibians, who's in like Southern California. Shout out to Birthday Dad, who's like Central California. So there's a lot of like Cali bands, Pennsylvania bands, and Florida bands. But yeah, Denver, we're our buddies in Wishkit. They joke that they're the only rock band in Denton, Texas, and we sometimes feel like the only emo band. That's not true. There's some really good emo music too, but we sometimes feel like the only emo band in Denver.
Yeah, 'cause it's probably just you and a couple people you know in other bands, right?
That's right. Yeah, totally. It's our little collective of songwriters that we really respect. But honestly, most of our friends in Denver that we play shows with, they're not necessarily emo bands. They're like either straight synth pop or indie rock or singer-songwriter stuff. And so when we play locally, we play a lot of like cross-genre bills, which is fun and enjoyable.
Great.
Yeah, but I wish there was a more robust sort of like emo band scene in our city.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like personally, I'm in Ypsi in Michigan, so if you ever do need to come through
Yeah,
Michigan, I should be able to help out.
yeah,
But there's not a lot of people doing what I'm doing out here. Like, there's quite a few emo bands, but no one's doing like alternative rap, you know?
interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Like, there's people doing rap, but there's not people doing like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, I feel like the only person doing this in
I
Ipsy.
know.
So it's hard. So all my shows have been like cross-genre shows. I played with people who just like, you know, do things completely different from me. Most of them haven't even been electronic. So I can say I can relate to that feeling.
Yeah, and it's definitely a lonely sort of isolating sometimes sort of feeling, but it's also like you kind of learn to love what you have, right? I mean, that's like for me, that's the healthiest. I've struggled with depression and sort of melancholy sort of headspace my whole life, and one of the things that's just been really helpful personally is like just learn to love like what's in front of you and like what you have instead of just always noticing what you don't have. So it's I think with maybe feeling a little bit alone or a little bit different in your scene, it's just like, yeah, well, it is what it is. And I get to play with really cool artists that are just totally different than me. And that's kind of a ride too.
Yeah. And just have it like, it's one of those things is like, you should just be grateful that you have a scene. Like,
Yeah.
and I got to tell myself, like, just be grateful. There's like, you know, a handful of people around here that make music that I personally find good. So it's like, all right, I'll play with them. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and I've heard there's like two main trains of thoughts on this, right? It's like, well, you want to cross pollinate fan bases as much as you can. So if you can have similar bands that may have different reaches, that's great because theoretically every band's fans will then become fans of every other band. But you hear they talk about this a lot on Washed Up Emo and other spots like that, where so much of that really that whole 90s scene being born out of like a bunch of hardcore kids that then started to want to sing some songs, and then that turned into like, hey, maybe we sing some songs and also have some clean guitars. And what you ended up with by the late 90s especially is like, and even like early Dashboard is a great example of this. Like, you'd go to a hardcore show and Chris Carrabba would get up there with an acoustic guitar in an open tuning and basically get stuff thrown at him until he would leave the stage because no one wanted to hear, you know, sad boy wimpy stuff. But within a really short window of time, like, he endeared himself to them, and what you ended up having are these what feel like really heavily cross genre shows. And that's kind of what that whole scene was birthed from, was people showing up for hardcore shows, getting really beautiful acoustic singer-songwriter stuff and everything in between. And within 5 years, this scene explodes. And so those cross genre shows are actually some of my favorites to play, because it gives you an opportunity to like, no, we're going to win you over. Right. Like, we're going to win you. And I know you're not here for us, but by the end of it, like, you're going to love us.
That's right.
I think too, with a smaller scene, whenever we do find another band that we like, it's like really exciting and we want to be friends with them. So I think if we had tons of bands that were great around us, we'd be a little less likely to reach out.
Yeah, I can say from experience. So back in, like 2019, I was in an emo band. And that's when the Ipsy scene was very big. There was tons of emo bands playing, tons of like, emo adjacent bands. So at that point, it's like, all right, I just kind of like fuck with who fucks with me.
Right.
Personally, not just like who's like, oh, I like your band. Like, can I stand there and smoke a cigarette with you after the show and have like a good conversation? Or is it like awkward and weird? Because if we don't vibe, then I'm like, all right, even though your band's great, I'm going to support your band, but like, I'm not going to try to play bills with you as much.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's like, to me, it's like, if you're kind and your art is good, then I will die for you. Like, I will
absolutely
promote the hell out of your show, even if I'm not on the bill. Like one of the things that we have really tried to do as a band is be every other band's like biggest cheerleader, especially those that like we love and like would die for, because they're just good people that make great music. But it's like, every scene, every town has got those 2 or 3 or 4 bands where it's just like, bro, you're an asshole. Like, you're not nice, you're not kind, you're not gentle. You're here to just kind of blow up your own ego, and you're not about the scene as a whole, right? And so one of the things that we just try to do is we're not trying to take down those bands, but we are trying to lift up those bands who are kind and gentle, and the art is.
Hell yeah. I am realizing we haven't talked too much about, we were talking about the scene more. Let's get down to the nitty gritty about the album. I want to kind of do, since this is the breakdown of Music Mondays podcast, let's break down your self-titled from press start.
Sure.
I want to know where the idea for that song came from, the goal of the song in different phases.
Yeah.
Because I know that personally, a song will have a goal when you're writing it,
right?
A goal when you are choosing it, and a goal when you're placing it in the album, especially. Like, obviously, Press Start, is here as an intro song.
Right.
But tell me about that. Let's start from there.
Yeah, so we thought a lot about the sequence of the album. We actually, before we recorded a note, we had sequenced the record because we had 15 songs that we really liked. We narrowed it down to maybe like 12 or 13 that were like, we thought these are the ones that we want to play the most. These are the ones that we want to listen. Like, we re-listen to our own demos a lot when we're writing. And we just notice the ones that we just are drawn to like listen to again and again. And so Press Start, because it acts as like, it's like a chiptune intro that takes the melody. It takes the melody from Book, the song after it, and Is It Love, which is the last track on the record.
But we did add the Is It Love melody later, because Is It Love, and we'll get to this, was a very last minute addition to the album. We actually recorded that probably 6 months after we had recorded almost everything else.
Yeah. So the first track, Press Start, and the last track, Is It Love, were the last things recorded for the record, and the last song sort of written for the record. And so Nick especially has always loved chiptune emo sort of music. So there's like this really cool band called Exciting Excellent, and There's this really cool band called Dungeon Item, and they are just like,
Yeah,
dude,
Yeah,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
real heads
shout
know.
out to both of them.
yeah. So they're just, I love their stuff, and Exciting Excellent. They'll like straight write and record from a Game Boy, and so we're not that authentic with the chiptune stuff. But so Nick just produced. He was like, well, let's start the rec. Oh, actually, it was Ryan's idea, right? To do like,
Yeah, it was Ryan's idea.
Well, initially, I remember hearing the Phoebe Bridgers, the DVD menu thing, and I was
Yes.
like, oh, we should have something like that. Maybe it's like putting in a cassette tape or something. And Ryan
Right.
was like, no, let's do the arcade thing.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's Ryan is he's the oldest member in our band, and he is old enough to remember like arcades in the late 80s, where like you would go and you'd actually play Smash 'em Up like Double Dragon or Ninja Turtles or whatever. And so he had the idea of like, let's just do like we're a video game, essentially, or like the idea was even kind of kitschy of like, hey, we're gonna put a quarter in A Place for Owls, the video game. And we originally had thoughts maybe of like, would that sort of permeate our album art? Like, would we sort of be like 80s video game themed? But it didn't quite work.
Well, and then Weezer dropped the album art for the what do they call it? What was their Van Halen or whatever?
Van Weezer.
Yeah, Van Weezer. Like they dropped the artwork for Van Weezer, and it's like it would be too similar. We can't do that.
Yeah. So, anyway, so what survived from all that sort of very stupid ideas and very stupid but creative process was like, we'll just do this chiptune intro to the album, and it just worked. And it was also like the rest of the record is just, it feels fairly straightforward, like indie rock or emo or like acoustic, like sort of acoustic emo. And we just wanted to do something different to maybe differentiate ourselves a little bit. So Nick programmed Press Start, and it's a chiptune version of Book, which is the track that's after it. And then once we wrote the last track on the album, Is It Love, and we recorded, we'll get to that when we get to the end, but like we recorded Is It Love live all together in the same room, one microphone. And we realized that the chorus melody from Is It Love would just seamlessly fit over the melody for Book. And so Nick just popped that on in Press Start. So we're really proud of it. It's dumb. And I was like a little anxious of like, is this gonna, I don't know, are we gonna pull this off? But I think it really fits.
Well, and it helps too that, we are collectively very big fans of open tunings,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps that Book and Is It Love, I don't know if they're actually in the same tuning,
But the same key.
but they're the same key.
Yeah.
And so even if they aren't in the same tuning, there's at least this bridge to where, and again, because we are album people, if you put your Sony Discman on repeat,
Right.
what you're going to get is a cohesive loop,
Right.
from start to finish and back over itself. And
Right.
so it felt appropriate to have Press Start be kind of this bridge between the first actual song with words and a melody and the last song with actual words and a melody. And Press Start kind of perfectly links the bookends of the record.
Right.
So, Book, tell me about Book.
So, I have, especially in times of depression, really bad. I'm not able to focus and sort of follow through on things, and that manifests in historically, like I grew up as a kid who would just devour books. Like when I was a teenager and an adolescent, like reading was my main pastime. Like TV, video games, a little bit, but like mostly I was a reader. I've noticed as an adult that, especially the more depressed I get, that just like I'm not able to really. I'll start a book and then get like 3 chapters in and then put the book down, and then 3 months will go by and then I'll be like, I have no idea what's going on, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever. And so my wife will get on me because I'll have 6 books in my little like end table. And she's like, are you reading all of those? And I'm like, but I could read them. Like, it's kind of like my emotional support pile of books, you know? And so I just was so frustrated with my own lack of focus and my own lack of like I feel the most like myself when I'm just reading as a regular habit. And so because I wasn't reading, I just didn't feel like myself, right? And so that song started out, we will often write starting with a group of songs that's in the same guitar tuning, and that is the American Football Never Meant tuning. It's FACGCE, and like I was writing a crop of songs in that tuning, and I was writing with Nick actually on some of these songs, and just the line that kept coming was like, "There's a book that I'm trying to read." And it's like that feeling of being helpless to sort of do better. And it's not being able to finish a book is not the worst thing in the world. I was still able to like show up to work. I was still able to like mostly be present in my other relationships. But like, it felt like a crisis because I couldn't finish a goddamn book. Right. And so that song was sort of birthed out of that feeling. And then the chorus of "I'm holding on to something greater than myself. Hope is hard to come by these days. Calling out for help." It's just like that feeling of like, I can't fix the thing that I'm experiencing in my own life. So I kind of need external help from my friends, my community, those around me, God, whatever. Like, I need help from outside of myself to like just kind of be like, remind myself that I'm myself again.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I definitely can relate that to other things. Like, it's a very relatable experience for people with depression.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, I can, get my paycheck. I can, make my partner feel like I'm present. I can talk to my friends and hang out with my friends. But it's like, there's stuff that I want to do that I'm just not able to do.
Right.
And there's definitely that comes with music sometimes too. And that's the worst one, is when it's
Yes.
like, I can't do music right now.
Right. Whether even listening or writing, there's like sometimes when I'm so depressed, it's like I can't even pick up the guitar or whatever. And that's like the saddest moment for me. So it's almost like with songwriting for me, it's like I got to have that sweet spot of depression where I'm not too depressed that I can't write anything, do anything, but I'm just depressed enough to like want to be introspective and like, what the hell is going on with me? And then that's where the songwriting happens.
Yeah, we just call that simmering melancholy.
Yeah.
That's where that's where the best stuff comes from, is that low, just always there, but just under the surface melancholy. That's the sweet spot.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we're going for. Just to be kind of depressed.
Yeah. But not cripplingly so.
Yeah.
And I would say that comes across sonically too.
Yeah.
Of that, there is that melancholy vibe to your band.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. No question mark.
It's
Thank
a good
you.
thing.
Yeah.
So yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But that's what comes with emo, like in general, of staying in some vein of emo, is there is that melancholy vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we went over the tracking, so we actually don't have to get into the studio experience of Book is there any memorable studio experiences from Book?
We took a lot of time to record guitar on that record. Frightened Rabbit is a big band for all of us, and Book was the song that we most wanted to sort of replicate some of the feeling that we feel when we listen to like Winter of Mixed Drinks and some of those classic Frightened Rabbit records. And one of the things that Frightened Rabbit does a lot is they'll layer guitar. So there'll be like a fuzzy, distorted, washed out guitar playing the same rhythm part that an acoustic is playing, or like a more clean tone electric guitar. And so we went pretty buck wild, like recording guitar parts for that. Like how many guitar tracks do you think is at one point when it gets the biggest for Book?
Yeah, it's a little tricky because we split some stuff out tonally. And so it isn't all of these tracks at once, but at one point I think we had 12 or 13 guitar tracks.
Yeah.
Again, not everything being played at once, but I mean, especially when everyone first comes in,
right?
And we've got that that part that we definitely did not rip off from the Dressners and the National,
right?
Where you have the lead guitar part that like kind of hard pans from one side to the other.
Yeah.
I think in that section and by the end of the song, there's a few spots where we've got 7 or 8 distinct guitar parts going.
Yeah. And that's a little frightening for a band that tries to play live and tries to play live faithfully to like what it sounds like on record. So we didn't want to do it too over the top, but it's just more like layers. And that's the song that feels the most like, okay, the best show I've ever, I think, seen was I saw at Red Rocks. The National was the headliner. They were touring, golly, was it High Violet or was it the record after? But the opening bands were Frightened Rabbit and Local Natives. And
horrible bill.
But
just trash.
Yeah. And I feel like Book feels like I was just like I wanted to replicate how I felt at that show. So it feels a little bit Frightened Rabbit, a little bit like the National, and even a little bit like Local Natives in parts.
And we did want to come out swinging.
Yes.
There was an element, and actually, there was threats made. There were threats made of this song being cut from the album, and I basically had to go full like sackcloth and ashes, tearing my shirt open, like in defense of making sure this song did not get cut from the album, because that moment when it goes from just Ben's guitar and vocal to kind of opening up when we hit that first chorus with the bells and it's all really pretty or whatever, and then you just get hit by a freight train at the end of that first chorus. That was such an important moment for me in the album that I was kind of willing to die on a hill for that song making the cut, and I'm glad everybody saw reason.
Yeah.
All right. And then let's move on to Dissolver.
Yeah, so Dissolver, so another big band for me is Me Without You. And Me Without You, a lot of Aaron's lyrics are inspired by or direct quotes of Rumi poems. Rumi is like a 12th century Persian Muslim poet. And Rumi dialogues a lot with like, what is the divine in us and what's the divine in the universe? And like, so Me Without You is obviously, they're asking a lot of big questions and talking a lot. And so I fell in love with this Rumi poem called Dissolver of Sugar. And the lyrics are almost verbatim the Rumi poem Dissolver of Sugar. And so that's one of the only tracks on the album that I didn't write the lyrics to. But it was one of those, like, you come across a piece of poetry and you're just like, I want to memorize this. I want this to be like written on my heart. And one of the ways that people have memorized words throughout history is just writing music to it. And it's easier to remember a song than it is just like a poem or whatever, right? And so it was just, even in my own just like life, I was just like, I want to know, I want to think about these things and really sort of resonate with what the poem is talking about. And so I wrote the music around this Rumi poem from the 12th century. And, but then we're like getting into a bunch of like shoegaze and like slowcore bands. And like, so we wanted the guitars to be really fuzzy, really washed out, really, this was where I think Daisy chained 2 guitar pedal boards together to just get really weird sounds on the guitars.
And not insignificant pedal boards either. Ryan and I both have a bit of a problem in which is funny because again, he plays bass, I play drums, and yet we both have the most excessive pedal boards in the band because we're tone hunters, we're going after we're going after that sound. So at one point, we realized we weren't getting the fuzz and the drive and the insanity that we wanted, and so we daisy chained our pedal boards together and basically stacked 6 drive pedals together.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it was ridiculous, but this is also you know, one of the classic tricks of getting a really unique drive sound is a bunch of drive pedals at really low gain stages. This is how like Eric Johnson got the Cliffs of Dover sound. That was like 3 different drive pedals at varying stages, right? So yeah, but it was a moment where we were like, well, surely that wouldn't actually work. And then we, linked them together and ran it all. We're like, that is super noisy and perfect.
Yeah. So Dissolver is another open tuning. So Dissolver, Do I Feel at Home Here, and Say What You Are, which are the next 2 tracks, are all in the same open tuning. It's E, A, E, G sharp, B, E. So it's essentially standard where you tune the D up to an E and the G up to a G sharp. And you can still do power chords like you would in standard, but you've got those open notes that are just so beautiful. And it sounds really good with like a fuzzy, shoegazy sort of vibe. And so it was, I think all 3 of those songs were written together, and it just made sense. Because again, we think about sequencing and sort of an album experience a lot, and it just made sense to put those 3 songs together because they kind of flow seamlessly into each other.
Yeah. Dissolver, and then so let's start talking about Do I Feel at Home Here?
Do I Feel at Home? Yeah, go for it.
I want to know what do y'all get out of Dissolver, since that is, especially that's like not, that was the poem, that was the Rumi poem.
Right.
Just personally, like, what do y'all take from that?
I think the hardest and the best thing a person can do is just hold the fact that they're going to die in their head and in their heart.
Memento mori.
Yeah. Remember death. There's like this huge tradition of just like, it's the reality that we are most trying to distract ourselves from, but it's just like the reality is every single person who's alive right now is going to be dead in 100 years, right? Or whatever. And so there's just like these questions of like, what happens to the soul? Does the soul even exist? Like what legacy am I leaving behind? How am I affecting the people around me? There adds like the sort of acknowledgement of death creates some urgency to be vibrantly alive and to live on purpose, right? And not just to sort of like float through a bullshit job or float through a life where you're not being fully as kind as you could be, or as impactful or as beautiful as you could, right? And so, and it's really depressing to think about death. Like that sucks. But like the reality is it's going to happen to all of us, and we all have to sort of reconcile ourselves to that reality. And so there's one line that in particular, the line is, every morning I wait for dawn. That's when it happened before. Do it gently like an execution. How else can I get ready for death? And in Dissolver, the lyric is like, are you talking to a lover? Are you talking to God? Who are you talking to? But it's this sense of like love and annihilation are not mutually exclusive. Like there's like, you would say to a lover, like, I want to be lost in you. I want to be lost in us, in a healthy, not codependent sort of way. Like you still sort of like, there's a little love and a little bit of self-annihilation sometimes happen at the same time, right? And it's mystical too. I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Like, I have no idea what honestly will happen at death. I've got some like thoughts, I've got some hopes, but like, I don't know. So that line of like, how else can I get ready for death? It just really hit me, and it felt important to me to like sing and think about.
Absolutely. Also, side note, y'all are nailing this interview.
Oh,
Give
thank
me
you.
all the information I need. Y'all keep telling me about the tunings, especially
Yeah.
here, especially.
Yeah.
That's the stuff people want to know. If people are interested in the breakdown of this album,
Yeah.
they want to know. Yeah, but also, damn, I'm thinking about death.
Yeah. I'm sorry,
Good.
and you're welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm sorry, and
It's
you're
a good thing to think about.
Yeah.
Personally, my thing is, I have music. I have a ton of music that's not out. I don't want to die yet,
Yeah.
and so to get ready for death, I'm gonna keep publishing music and like trying to actually finish things. So
Yeah.
that
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't have forever, right? And so it gives a little fire under your feet and a fire in your belly to like finish things and see things through, So I love that.
But so do I feel at home here? This is one of the shorter songs on the album. Only 3 seconds longer than Is It Love?
Right.
But tell me about Do I Feel at Home Here?
So that's that open E tuning as well. And just the chord shapes sound really dissonant. Like when you play an A chord in that open tuning, you get a lot of notes clashing against each other. And it just felt a little unhinged, and it felt a little like
unsettled.
That's right. Yeah. And so the just kind of playing some of those chords, so in the middle of the pandemic, my wife and I were out of work for 4 or 5 months. We're like looking at, and Denver is one of the most expensive cities in the country. It's like the average 2-bedroom home in Denver, Colorado right now is like $2,200 per month. And we housing is considered affordable if you're like paying less than 30% of your income. And me and pretty much everybody I know is paying way more than 30% of their income towards housing in Denver. And it's really fucked up. It's one of our city's biggest problems is that like housing diminishes the quality of life for people because they have less disposable income for the sort of recreation and the sort of lifestyle that like everybody who moves to Colorado wants to live. They want to have free time, but we have free time for our hobbies and getting outside or whatever. But like most of us find that we don't have as much time for our free time because we're working so hard just to afford the goddamn rent. And so that was sort of in me. And for my day job, like I work with formerly homeless folks, trying to get them to like get back on their feet. And I just was so angry that we lived in a place that like the good life was only available if you were independently wealthy. Like, and so many people who grew up in Denver, because our city has gotten way more expensive over the last 10, 20 years, it's just like people who grew up here were like, I think I need to move elsewhere. And so we were out of work, my wife and I, and we're like, should we move to Wichita? Should we move? Like, where should we go? That would be maybe cheaper because we don't have income right now. We're out of work. Like, what the hell are we doing? And there's just all these sort of questions. And the best lyrics on the album, I think, are the ones that are posed as questions. I think a question is like way more inviting to people to like wrestle with a concept than if you gave a definitive answer. Like if I just said, what happens after you die? And then that starts a conversation instead of like, let me tell you what happens after you. You know what I mean? So like, so that song, Do I Feel at Home Here? Every line is a question. Do I doubt? Can I tell the difference between my dreams and fears? Am I so alone here? Am I without? Can I be the one to misdirect myself? And you can come up with your own sort of answers to those questions. But it also, at the same time, as being maybe for me lyrically one of the heaviest and most like angry. We're not a heavy band. We're not an angry band usually. That definitely feels like the most like frustrated that we get.
There's tension for sure.
Yeah. And so, but it's also like, it's a fun sort of like pop punk-y sort of 2-minute banger. And it was the one that felt like that was our lead single from the record, because it felt like, well, not only is it 2 minutes and we're all ADD and we can't hold our attention for longer than 3 minutes or whatever. And so we did our friend Michael Goldstein shot a really fun music video that is we really loved. He did it all in black and white, and it feels so like 90s classic skate punk sort of video.
And the pacing of the edit in the video matches kind of the timbre of the song for us, which is almost like Great White Shark, like if I stop swimming, I die, type of thing. Like if I slow down long enough to think about the answers to these questions, I don't know if I'm gonna like what I tell myself.
Right.
And so if you just keep moving, if you keep doing enough and moving from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, then you don't actually have to reconcile within yourself the answers to those really hard questions. And the music video, I thought, did a brilliant job of reflecting that dissonance within the song itself.
And shooting the music video is actually fairly healing for me, because we went to all my favorite spots in Denver. Like we went to the corner of 14th Street, where there's Wax Trax Records and Kilgore Books and Comics, and like my favorite coffee shop and breakfast place, and the parts of Denver that I actually do feel at home in. So even as much as when I was writing the song, I was like, Denver sucks for these reasons, like remembering that, like, hey, I've got my buds here. I've got my closest relationships here. I've got places that mean a lot to me. I've got things that I like doing. Like, yeah, kind of, I do feel at home here. But then, you know, some days I'll go back and forth and I'm like, this place sucks or whatever. So yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, but that's really just amazing that the music video is, you know, kind of reminding you personally, like, why you do feel at home here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The answer at the end of the music video is, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. yeah.
At least right now.
At least right now.
So let's move on to Say What You Are.
So this is, I like doing a callback to previous songs that we've written. On the acoustic EP, we did a song called Tell Me You Are, which is, so the melody of the chorus is exactly the same, but Tell Me You Are is in a minor key. It's an E minor. And then Say
so
What
it is sorry, not the same tuning.
No, yeah. But the songs are on the acoustic EP, it's an E minor song where it goes, Tell Me You Are, and it sounds like this mournful, sort of like plaintive sort of feeling. And then for this record, we did Say What You Are, which is like in an E major key, but it's the exact same notes going, Say What You Are. And it's just like, it felt a little bit more hopeful. And so I don't know exactly how the lyrics or the content of both songs. Say What You Are is one of those where the lyrics are super simple, and then there's this weird spacey outro that we did, which we had never done before, and we're really like glad to be able to do. But I don't know if I can tell you what those lyrics are about. I know how those lyrics make me feel. Like, say the thing you'd say if you were one feels like, if you pretend you're healthy, what would you act like? And so it's kind of like a self-talk song, but it's one of those where it feels like a Radiohead lyric where it's like, I know what it feels like, right?
It's just really dreamy.
Yeah.
Everything about the song has always felt dreamy. The arrangement, the melody, the lyrics, like, I don't know if it actually, for me, I don't know if I've ever felt any level of urgency to figure out what that song is.
Right.
Because every time I hear it, it's just kind of a thing you experience.
Right.
Personally.
Yeah.
And I didn't write the song, so, you know, that's, you know, take that for what it's worth. But that's one of the things I really enjoy about it, is that it's this nice break, especially coming off the frenetic heels of Do I Feel at Home Here.
Yeah.
It's a nice change of pace to kind of resettle you and like intentionally slow down.
Yeah. And it's just, there's a lot of space at the end. and it feels like, not in a way that you get bored, but it feels like a song that's longer than it is. It's only 3 minutes and some change or whatever, but it does feel like kind of a palate cleanser and for the rest of the record from where we.
Yeah, that's one too where going into the studio, I didn't really have a lead guitar part for it, and Ryan just kind of grabbed a guitar and came up with something, and it's great. It's really, really good.
Yeah. Daniel is our lead guitar player, but he is the least egotistical of guitar players. He will come up with some of the lead parts on Something Is Not Right. Both lead parts on Something Is Not Right, Daniel wrote. And so he's got an ability to write some really memorable and melodic leads, but he's also really non-egotistical in that, like, if everybody else in the band plays guitar too. So if somebody's got a lead line that works for the song, that becomes the lead part, and then that's what Daniel plays live. And he's also like really not egotistical about like if he doesn't have to be the one that records the lead part on it. So I really love that.
We actually had, this is another fun tidbit. Every member of the band sang on the record at some point, and every member of the band played a lead guitar part on the record at some point.
Right.
That's just cool. That's like, hell yeah. And that kind of just shows the fact of, you're saying that A Place for Owls is a democracy.
Yeah.
And it really sounds like you have this pure democracy of like, someone wants to step up and take the role.
Yeah.
No one has any complaints, right?
Yeah.
Let's let them take the role.
Yeah.
It is very democratic in that whoever's kind of got the best part is going to end up recording it.
And also, like, so Jesse mentioned that at one point I foolishly, crazily wanted to cut Book from, like, I was cutting songs that I wanted to get down to 10 songs because I kind of had this, like, do people even like albums anymore? Are they going to have the attention span to go through the full record? So I was like, let's just make the most concise version of it. And so at one point I was talking about cutting Book and making it a B-side or whatever. But I got voted down, shot down so hard. And even though it's like I wrote the song in maybe a more sort of like hierarchical sort of band structure, the lead singer and the songwriter is the one who has the final say. And I just absolutely did not get the final say in that. And they were right to do it. It was I was advocating for something that was totally stupid. So I really, it slows things down sometimes for me. And I'm always thinking about like, what's next? And what's the next song that we're writing? What's the next thing that we're recording? And I'm like, I get impatient sometimes with being in a democracy, like it's kind of like being married to 4 dudes, you know, it's like, you have to like really take into account everybody's feelings and the emotional wavelength, and that you may not have the best ideas, but it's been so fruitful in our band. I think the art is better for the process, even though it's a little bit slow.
Yeah, that's good though, and that makes it everyone's band. And at the end of the day, I know personally, like when I was in a band, I tried to make. At one point, I was just a 2-piece, so it's like, yeah, it's our band for sure. Like, you know, we don't have any guests, but like even when I started to include other people, like we got like lead guitar and bass. Finally, I was like, hey, this is our band. Like, if you think something should sound some way, tell me. Let's figure it out. You know? And that also, I feel like, adds to the longevity of the band. Everyone feels seen and heard.
Yes.
They're more likely to want to stay.
Yes. I agree so much. And it also, we have a lot of friends who have solo projects. Even if their album sounds full band, it's like essentially just one dude or one girl that's like the lead person. And we hear them talk about how lonely it is especially the grind. Like, songwriting's good. If you figure out songwriting by yourself, that can work. You can even figure out recording by yourself. But the grind of like, I'm going to go hustle online. I'm going to go try to get on these playlists. I'm going to try to like get our music in front of other people. When you have 5 people that are just as invested, like it makes things so easy. So one of the things Daniel has really done for us is like really hustling to get us on a bunch of Spotify playlists, not like we've not gotten on one of those editorial playlists yet. Inshallah, we'll get there. But like, but like the reality is that like Daniel has just hit up. So you've got this Midwest emo playlist that has 2,000 likes. He finds that person and he messages them and says, "Here's our song. Do it."
That's what you got to do, though.
Yeah.
And yet you will never interact with Daniel on social media because he treats it like the plague.
Yeah.
So if you've ever interacted with Apfo on Twitter, that was Ben or that was Nick because they are our little social boys.
Yeah.
But if you ask Ben to like, hey, go get us on this playlist, he'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah, totally. So it's nice when everybody's invested and you can sort of compartmentalize the work of the grind. That's been really good for us.
Hell yeah. I mean, y'all just passed, what was it? Y'all went back over 7K?
Yeah,
on Spotify,
it's
right?
we're floating around 8,000 monthlies right now. And the last track on our acoustic EP is almost 80,000 listens. And you want to say like, oh, well, the art's good and so people like it. And that, like if people wouldn't listen a bunch if it wasn't on some level good. But that is almost all exclusively Daniel's hustle of like getting us on these small to mid-size Spotify playlists. And it's Keegan from Camp Trash, he'll talk about how being in a band is kind of just being a con man. And so it's the whole thing of like, you get streams and then you use those streams to like con your way into playing a bill. Like, I feel like with String Machine, like we got that show because we conned our way into it. There's no reason why we should have been on that show. They're an amazing band and they're touring the country and we still feel kind of that imposter syndrome of like we're not a real band, And so but doing the hustle of getting on Spotify playlists and then getting streams it's also gotten us into the algorithm, like where Spotify is starting to put us on like people's Discover Weekly playlist, which is so freaking cool. And so I don't know, man. It's like I feel like this whole process of we're starting to be like treated like a real band, and I still internally am like, we're pretenders to the throne. You know what I mean?
Hopefully you start to, acknowledge the throne because y'all earned it.
Yeah.
The music, to speak like technically the product, what you're trying to sell to people is good.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for
It's
saying
very
that.
good. It's well constructed. It has a lot of passion in it, and you can tell.
Yeah.
It's like, this is good music.
Thank you.
And then you take that and you do expand, you play the game, but you're playing the game with I guess, especially as like an MMO kind of thought,
right?
Your character's got a pretty good stat.
Yeah.
Thank you. Especially because you got 5 people playing the same character.
That's
basically.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
So you start getting into the PvP mode,
right,
on the playlists, and you're doing good.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be on those playlists if your music was trash.
Yeah.
Like people don't. So it's like, all right, you just got to keep reminding people or keep inviting people to acknowledge what you have.
Yeah.
And then they'll take it and run with it. Cause like, yeah, that's why you're on this podcast. I was listening to A Place for Owls and I was like, I need to know everything about this album.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's very encouraging. And it will, for a brief moment, tamper down that imposter syndrome that we all experience. As soon as we're off this call, we'll immediately feel like fools and imposters. So
You're like, there's no way he publishes this.
Yeah.
There's no way this gets published.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, that is really encouraging.
Yeah. But so let's move on to I Can't Write It Down.
Dude, this was probably the most gut-wrenching. I sent demos I include my best friend from high school is a guy named John Roberts. He's not a musician, but he's just a music fan. I send him every demo almost that I write just to get his feedback. And he's one of those guys that like, he will tell you if something sucks. So when I sent him my original like acoustic demo for I Can't Write It Down, he was like, I don't like that song. It makes me feel depressed. And now it's like, once it came out, I was asking him, you know, feedback on the record, and he goes, well, my favorite track is I Can't Write It Down. I was like, dude, that's the one that you hated. And he was like, well, it was too real. Like I spent some time as a young man, like actually living in my car. And I spent some time like just being a functional alcoholic and drinking too much, and my like dropped out of college. My life was in chaos. My high school and college girlfriend broke up with me, and like it was a bad time. And whenever the pandemic hit and I'm sitting by myself, I just found myself drinking like a lot, like because I was out of work. I had some money from unemployment and there was nothing to do. So I just drank beer and whiskey. And, and I remember feeling afraid that I was turning back into that same chaotic kid who was sleeping in his car. And like, you know, like it just was a visceral sort of fear of like, I'm going to fuck my life up again. And it's going to be bad. And so that's where that song comes from. You know, the bridge, I think at the end, towards the end, is like the hardest one for me to like hear and sing a little bit, where it's just like talking about like, you're talking to yourself of like, you could just have another drink, and you're like, but I'm not a lush. And like, but it's like, and then that line that really, I don't know, it tears me up a little bit. But it's like, if they find out, just they being everyone in the entire world, your wife, your best friends, your boss, people around you, like if they find out who you are, that you're just that same white trash kid that's sleeping in your car, like what will happen? What will happen, you know? And so, I don't know, man, that's probably for me, like it's the darkest song on the record lyrically, but it's the funnest musically, which I love that juxtaposition of like that felt the most like a Taking Back Sunday song, or like one of those really good mid 2000s emo bands. And the bridge at the end, especially, we call it the trash can guitar solo, which is Ryan, our bass player, played. It's just like he tried to play badly, but still melodically, and still like almost like it makes you feel like there's just really noisy rock and roll happening. And the drums are the biggest that they are, I think, on the record. The whole thing, I think I'm really gratified by and satisfied with, because it just came together of like, this is the saddest song I've ever written, possibly. But it's also like, it was one of our singles that was before the record. And it's the one that there's a local indie radio station. It's the one they picked up to start playing
before we had actually even released it. We told them what the singles were going to be. They asked for a handful of songs, which that one was not included.
Right.
We also sent them, we leaked, quote unquote, leaked the album to them once we got the masters back, and they actually went and pulled that song to play it.
Right.
Because that's the one that really stuck with them.
Yeah, so it's a weird song for me in that it feels like this is the most honest I've ever been about what I'm afraid of, but it's also like, that's one of our lead singles, and yay! You know?
Yeah. As personally, that one's a tough one. I had struggles with alcohol in my life, so that is definitely like something that's like, oh, I get that. And just like, yeah, struggling with any kind of addiction, especially as an artist, it's like, do I want to write about this? Because am I going to either come off as like, oh, I just popped a Zan,
right?
Or is it like, are people going to get that? Like, do I get that I'm doing this for a self-destructive reason almost?
Right. I had, before the record came out, we played a show where I just sort of, I said, this next song is about alcohol abuse, and everybody in the crowd cheered.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, don't cheer for that.
Yeah. Stop it. Naughty.
Don't cheer for that.
Don't you? you should go, "Are you okay?" And like, "Do you need to get help?" That's your appropriate response. Because it's weird in rock music, especially in Denver. People love to drink. People love to use recreational drugs. Like Denver is you go to a concert and you're either drunk or you're high. And that's one of the things that has kind of made me uncomfortable with some aspects of our music scene here is like we are glorifying things that have destroyed my life and has destroyed the lives of people that I love, right? And so it's kind of like we're going woo to a thing that we should be like, no, please, for the love of God, don't do that to yourself. Right?
Yeah, like everyone put your drink down for this song.
Yes.
Actually. Go get some water.
Yes. Yeah. There was a really unhinged show where every time I would reference alcohol in the song, I would just say, tip your bartender.
Tip your bartender.
Tip your bartender.
That was a wild
That's a
show.
tough one. Yeah. I don't know. I can attest. So the place that I've played recently was a kombucha bar.
Yeah.
So people weren't getting super drunk off kombucha, right?
Right.
But people were drinking. And I had a song where I was about to talk about alcoholism, and I was like, hey, this is a great time to tip your bartender.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hey, don't forget to tip the bartender.
Yes.
I'm drinking the regular tea, though.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also, you kind of want the venue to, like, my main goal is anytime I play a show, I don't care if anybody who bought a ticket likes me, I want the bartender and the sound guy to like me. That's all I want.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, because they're the people who are going to tell the venue owner that you ruled,
yes.
and the venue owner is going to hit you up again.
That's right. Yeah. So that was, I think, part of that energy too, of just like, please, for the love of God, if you drink to excess, at least be generous to the bartender, please.
Yeah. So, damn. Just sorry. Really relate to that song. It's a good song.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can relate to the experience of playing about playing songs about alcohol abuse to a crowd of people that are casually drinking.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah.
But let's move on to deliberate practice.
Yeah. So this is the structure of this song is most, I think, like a folk song. Like I grew up in West Virginia, and where I learned guitar was playing like traditional bluegrass and traditional folk songs. And so this, as far as the structure of it, as far as like how the lyrics sing and the verses, no chorus, just 4 verses back to back, feels very like old school British, Irish folk song. This is also one of the songs where I think the lyrics it's some of the work that I'm the proudest of, because it's asking really good questions, but all of the lyrics fit together in my mind, but it doesn't necessarily tell one cohesive narrative from front to back. But it's almost just like these little, like you pop up with an idea or a line, and it's one of those songs that just it lands with me in a way that I just want to play it all the time. Sonically, we were really inspired by bands like Sunny Day Real Estate and some of those mid-90s early emo bands that they would mix acoustic. Like, again, this was one where at different points there's 3 or 4 different rhythm electric. There's 2 different rhythm electric parts, and there's an acoustic. And Nick, who mixed the record, he does just a really good job of when it's appropriate. He dials up the heavy electric guitar, and then at different points he dials up the acoustic guitar. But those are all decisions that he made in mixing. Like how we recorded it was just front to back, recorded the whole song with a rhythm acoustic and 2 rhythm electrics. It also, this song features a stand-up double bass that Ryan plays that he bows, so that when it goes into the da 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 da, that melody, it's not only the lead electric guitar playing that, but it's also his double bass bowed, which adds just kind of like, I don't know, like an interesting sonic depth to it. And it's I don't know. Do you guys want to speak to this song at all?
Yeah, I mean, production wise, this is one of those that we had played. This is an older song that Ben had written. This song was actually first worked on as the 3-piece
Right.
rendition of A Place for Owls, and Ryan had always played upright with this. This was always double bass. This was always a bowed part, and even as the arrangement grew and the band grew, and this song, which gets very big by the end of it, arrangement wise, it's kind of a slow burn.
Right.
We keep that bass in there through the whole thing because that's always felt kind of foundational to the tone of the song. Like it doesn't really feel the same without that bass part. So yeah, I think it's kind of the bedrock of the whole thing.
And I think the feature of this song for me is the gang vocals that come in on the third verse where we jump the octave up and we say, I'm counting my blessings by twos and by tens, but we're like belting it. And it's all five of us on a mic singing the gang vocals at the same time, because that's like what our live shows feel like. And we're also really inspired by bands like I Feel Fine, who like almost exclusively use gang vocals on. There's like very rarely just one dude singing on an I Feel Fine song. And there's just something that, because we've talked about how we really value the sense of brotherhood, siblinghood in our band, and the fact that we're all five of us really invested in the art and the music and the hustle. And so anytime we can do gang vocals with all five of us just like screaming the lyrics, it just feels really good. And I feel like that's the thing that really pulls the song together for me, is like, here's these like kind of a little bit introspective lyrics. I'm singing some really specific lines like, you're quick to be angry, it's your grandmother's gift. Like that's something that just makes sense to me. But the fact that it's like got gang vocals over top of it, I think really ties it together.
Yeah, that song is, the gang vocals do it. Like that's like one of those things that's like, whoa. And I think that adds more to like, that folk vibe too of like, this is something that everybody can sing.
Right.
Of like, yeah. And while all the lyrics aren't necessarily like accessible lyrics, they're mostly things you had to unpack,
Yeah.
That's just, yeah.
Yeah.
Gives it a very, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the lyrics mean something very specific to me, but it's probably the most oblique song lyrically to others. Like, I don't know if everybody sort of grasped on to what I'm talking about, which I think is fine. And I think that you need some songs that people lyrically can sort of latch on to as like, I know what he's talking about. I really resonate. Like, I can't write it down with alcohol abuse or whatever, but the deliberate practice just felt right in that, like it's probably the most, weirdly, it's the most personal one I think that lyrically that I've.
And without getting too like philosophical, this is kind of the song that is most directly affected by the postmodernism aspect of, stop it. Genuinely though, like you look at how postmodernism affects art, and it is that almost the moment a piece, be it fine art or music, film, whatever, the moment a piece of art is released to the public, it ceases to be yours.
Right.
That's not how it always used to be, but culturally, this is how most people experience art nowadays. Right. And so, I'm a prime example of this. I've got a tattoo of Jimmy Eat World lyrics that, having heard Jim Adkins talk about the song, the lyrics do not even remotely mean the same thing to me as they do to him. That doesn't make them any less meaningful to me.
Right.
Right. And so I think Deliberate Practice is a great example of a song that it has a pretty deep and clear meaning to Ben as a songwriter. And yet it's one of those songs that people have latched onto. And I don't know if we particularly expected this to be one of those songs, but people have really kind of made this song their own.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that most people who love this song don't experience it the same way that Ben does, and that's completely fine.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's some good art to reflect. Inflect on, I guess
Right.
would be the word, right?
Yeah, sure.
And here is where we hit stop for the first part, and I'm going to bring you into part 2 right now. We ended up doing it in 2 parts. I don't remember if I said that at the beginning, and I don't want to play it back. So, yeah, here is part 2 of A Place for Owls. I'm just going to merge them together. It's one solid episode for you. And I'm back with A Place for Owls for part 2 of their album breakdown of their self-titled album, A Place for Owls. Welcome back.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So we are joined by one more of the members today.
Yes. So in addition to Ben, who is me,
Daniel.
Jesse.
we also have Nick.
Whoa.
Nick is our lead guitar player, piano player, saxophone player,
Vocalist.
sample player, vocalist, producer,
Engineer.
mix engineer. He does it all, babies.
He is that guy.
Hell yeah. Well, welcome to the show. Oh my God. Sorry, y'all. There's so many of you that I want to make sure I say everyone's name right.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
But it's like, damn. But so it's Nick, right?
that's right.
All right.
You nailed it.
Is there anything we got through the first 7 tracks? We got through side A. Is there any just mixing, mastering, engineering, recording things you wanted to talk about the album prior to that, or just wanted to speak on generally?
Yeah, I can talk about just like general approach for sure. I would say, yeah, maybe Jesse and I worked together on it quite a bit, and Jesse did more of the like microphone engineering type setup stuff, and I was usually clicking record and whatnot when we were tracking, and we kind of traded off on that. But we just really wanted to capture like what we actually sound like, it just kind of as honestly as possible, but like also as good as we possibly could. So we tried to make things sound beautiful on the way in. We tracked bass and drums together live. And then we started all this like 2 years ago. So, and it took a very long time. I think we were tracking, I don't even know.
Like, when did we do scratch tracks?
We did scratch tracks like wearing masks.
Yeah.
In Ben's apartment.
Yeah.
Or house.
Yeah.
And that was August of 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So between August of 2020, we had the songs written like summer of 2020.
Yeah.
August of 2020, we did the scratch tracks. So I had a rough idea of sequence of the records.
Yeah.
What songs we wanted on there. We cut 2 songs eventually from what we thought the record was going to be to get down to a lean 12 instead of a bloated 14. And then slowly over the winter of like mostly winter 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
Like actually tracked the thing, right?
Yeah. That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, we're just trying to capture what we sound like. So it's raw, I think, but it sounds maybe like, we didn't grid drums or anything like that. It's like,
We were opposed to it, actually.
yeah, we just wanted it to sound like a real band playing real music. So there are no, like sampled anything besides like the electric piano. And when we're choosing takes, like when we were comping things, we went for like what's more emotionally resonant rather than like what's more perfect necessarily.
So there's a few sloppy moments,
Yeah.
but overall feels like a really good emotive
Yeah.
sort of moment.
And we're not, to be clear, we're not opposed to using those tools when the time is right and when it's called for. But for our songs, it felt like we would not have been honest to our sound and to the songs themselves had we gone through and gridded the drums and cranked everyone's vocals to be absolutely perfect. That didn't really feel honest to who we are.
There's also no pitch correction besides like 2 or 3 things that I like chopped out and like manually adjusted. So there's no like Melodyne or anything, which is kind of fun. One of our main like mix references was Clarity by Jimmy. So I think that was a huge touchstone for me, and just like a record that sounded great but super real. And I think there was kind of just like a general feeling that we wanted to make kind of like a throwback. I don't know, what wave would that be? Like second wave. Second wave.
Yeah.
Like type of like production wise, that type of record is kind of what I had in mind.
Yeah, and definitely like has that vibe through the production and like, just the songs apart, just the way that it is, mixed and things like that. It's all clear, it's all there, it's a little raw, but it's not like, I don't know, it doesn't have that, 2022 like vibe. It has like a different vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. That's
not
cool
to
to
say
hear.
It doesn't sound modern, but it sounds nostalgically modern.
That's cool.
Nostalgically modern. We're putting that on something.
Yeah. Can we quote you on that?
Yeah.
Please do quote me on that. Nostalgically modern. That is really the vibe for A Place for Owls. Is it? Your sound like calls back to earlier days of emo and indie rock while still being like new and innovative, and building on a lab-grown guest. Mafuba described their music as identity punk, despite them making like, more like hyperpop stuff.
Yeah.
And it's definitely still in the vein of like that identity punk where it is purely like, especially everything being done mostly in-house, that truly like, this is us as a band, as people, as musicians. This is what we want to sound like.
Yeah.
And you do that. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
So do we want to get into the track breakdowns for the rest of the album?
Please.
For side B.
Let's do it.
All right. So we are on Something Is Not Right, correct?
Yes.
All right. Tell me all about it.
So Something Is Not Right is one of 2 songs on the record that are in kind of an open drop D over A tuning. It's D, A, D, E, A, E. So I really like, the tuning that we used on Book, it's the American football tuning. It does basically the same thing where it's kind of like an open chord, but it's a little bit suspended because it's the 4 over the 1, basically. And I just really love that sound. It partially because American football and other, City and Color and other like really foundational emo bands would use these open tunings that just even the open chord would be the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing you've ever heard, right? And so I was messing around with drop D, and I was just like, but I want to play drop D, but like have it be in A. And so sort of discovered that tuning, wrote like 3 or 4 or 5 songs in that tuning. This was the first demo that I sent the band. I know that the band resonates when Ryan, our bassist, will immediately track over my really shitty voice memo demo. He'll immediately track a bass part and send it back. And that's what happened with Something Is Not Right. And this is an example of how the bass is the most powerful instrument in the band because he took my verse on the record, which is F, the first chord in my mind, how I heard it in my head was F sharp minor, but he played a D over top of it and it like turned it into like a major key. So what we did on the arrangement of the song was the first verse is in F sharp minor and then the second verse is in D. This song it was a small little acoustic song that was roughly 2 minutes long. It was like, so the voice memo is just so simple.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are probably the most straightforward and subtle.
Unveiled.
Yeah. It's literally just like something is not right. I'm a little too anxious. I'm a little too sad. Something is not right. It's like the stupidest, most simple way that you could say, I am depressed right now.
I am not well.
I am not well. Yeah. And that's sort of, normally I try to the track before was Deliberate Practice, which is the most sort of like, this is kind of veiled in poetry. Like what even is going on?
It's wordy and
and even like my favorite songwriting reference that when folks hear our band and when they say we sound like the Weaker Thans and John K. Samson, just makes me so happy.
And Ben just starts glowing.
Yeah. Not only is John K. Samson one of my favorite songwriters of all time, but he has this pretentious in a good way literary vibe about him. It's kind of like his lyrics are on par with the best poetry in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I get that reference, it makes my little pretentious heart so happy. And that's what a song like Deliberate Practice is. And so partially it felt like this almost radical minimalism to just say, I'm going to actually just say what's happening internally to me.
Say the quiet part out loud.
Say the quiet part out loud. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we love about bands like The National, where they are saying the most vulnerable thing. But when you see them play Red Rocks or whatever, it's like there's literally thousands of people or whatever that are seeing this band. They're an arena rock band, but he is shouting and people are shouting the thing that you would never actually say out loud.
It's beautiful.
It's so good. And so that's how Something Is Not Right started. What it became was this really sprawling post-rock guitar. This is the most guitar rock that we get on the record. Daniel and I, on the way over here, we listened to side B in preparation. And I was just struck by like how riffy and Midwest emo and Explosions in the Sky, This Will Destroy You post-rock.
Yeah.
Like just super, it could exist. Like if we took the vocals just straight out of it, it could exist as a really engaging and interesting post-rock song with no lyrics, right? And so that felt fitting to like have this really simple lyric.
Yeah.
And almost really sort of childlike in its repetition. I'm just like saying something is not right. And a number of times, but then have it be built out with this giant guitar. And by the end, it gets really like, not only like post-rock, but it gets like hair metal. Jesse recorded this absolutely over the top, like just screaming, squealing hair metal guitar solo at the end. Jesse's our drummer. And we always joke, we said this last time, but our two best guitarists play drums and bass in the band. But this was every member of the band wrote a significant guitar part in this. So Daniel wrote 2 separate lead parts. Nick wrote a really engaging lead part that kind of comes on the start of the instrumental section. Jesse wrote the hair metal guitar solo and provided a lot of like feedback. All the feedback at the end is mostly
melodic,
Jesse.
Those harmonized feedback at the end.
And then I probably wrote my most interesting and most sort of emo.
Yeah.
I'm a strummer. I'm like a chord guy.
You got twinkly with this one, though.
Yeah.
You got a little
it's
twinkly.
Like, I feel like a singer-songwriter, folk singer, sort of at heart, as like at my base. And it was really cool for me on this one to just actually write some twinkly parts. And I think this was the one that probably transformed itself the most,
Yeah.
or grew the most expansive based upon the different parts that people were writing.
Yeah, totally.
It is funny to the what's that Tolkien idiom, the story grew in the telling.
Yes, that's right.
That's
yeah.
how this song felt to me. It felt like the further into the song we got, the more the song kept growing and asking for.
Yeah.
I was actually reluctant to do that solo because I almost made that quip like as a joke. I was like, just put like a big bluesy hair metal solo over this, and then everyone was like, "No, absolutely do it." I was like, that was supposed to be a joke, but okay, I'll work something out, and it. I think it actually does. I think it works.
There's this quote, and I'm blanking. It's a jazz legend who said that composition is improvisation slowed down.
Mhm.
And so this song felt the most like we just tried shit. Like we would improv parts and just riff on it together and separately over the song. And we ended up with some of the most, at least for me, interesting guitar work and interesting song structure, because it's 2 minutes of lyrics and then 3 minutes of sprawling instrumental at the end. But I don't know. I don't get bored listening to it, and
It's engaging.
I get bored easily listening to music that is repetitive and doesn't really like go anywhere, and it feels like it goes somewhere.
Well, and to your point, there's something for everybody in this one.
Yeah.
If you like guitar solos with every drive pedal turned on and every delay pedal turned on, we've got that. If you like really pretty like twinkly parts that kind of weave between one another that kind of dance, it's got that. If you like really sick melodic Paul McCartney bass parts, you've got that. If you like breakdowns, it's got that. Like it really does. I think it tells a really compelling story.
And I think my proudest moment post-release is a guy on Twitter who curates a emo through all the waves and ages playlist. He added Something Is Not Right to the end, sort of signify if we're actually indeed in fifth wave emo. He said that this is representative enough of fifth wave emo to like add it in, and I was just like, holy shit, that's amazing.
That feels good.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You made it.
We made it. The gatekeepers have said we're good.
Like odd in comparison, not odd.
Yeah. Odd.
What's the word? Different in comparison. Different. It is odd. It stands out. I mean, lyrically, especially. I mean, I guess, do I feel at home here? It's a little more, less lyrically dense.
Right.
But for this to be the longest track on the album,
Right.
And to be the least lyrically dense, is, I don't know. It shows that you are not just like a one-trick pony, I guess, of like, oh, I write these really wordy songs. It's like, no, you make, all kinds of songs as a band, and that just shows a versatility and gives a bit of a change, because like that's starting off side A, and it's just like, all right, and here is Riff City, USA.
Right.
Like, we got it right here. Shred it up, shred it down. And then we go into, where do you want to go?
Yeah. So this is in that same tuning of D-A-D, E-A-E. And this was the one where when you make up sort of an open tuning, you have to like learn what the chord shapes are and like what to do. So this one started from just like messing around in that chord formation. The progression is actually, as soon as Ryan, our bassist, heard it, he was like, this is a doo-wop song.
Yeah.
Not as a reductive, sort of like dismissive. He just immediately picked up on, this feels like as far as the chord structure, it felt like the verses were like dum da dum dum da dum, and that's the bass part that Ryan plays, and a little bit that informed the drumming. On that too.
It's got that heartbeat kick drum.
Yes,
kind of going throughout the whole thing.
The major touchstones on that song for us were definitely Jimmy Eat World Clarity.
Yeah.
Not only in the twinkly piano stuff, but in the vocal performance too.
Mm-hmm.
The song has no chorus, so to speak, but it has a B section, which starts out with the dun 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 dun. What's cool about that is that melody works over the major key progression in the verse, and it also works over the relatively minor key progression on the instrument, basically the instrumental part, the B part to the song. That was another one where we just were throwing everything that we could imagine against it. So it includes a really sick acoustic lead.
It's my favorite acoustic part.
Yeah, cool. Daniel wrote that. I don't even know. It wasn't in standard. What was the tuning that you used on that?
I had to detune one of the strings to get one of the open sounds that I wanted. But that was a funny part because I wrote it early on and then kind of forgot about it because we had so many layers and so many ideas. And then one day in recording, we're like, hey, what about that acoustic part that you did, the noodly thing? And I was like, oh yeah, I need to learn that so I can play it. But I'm so glad we took the time to do it because I think it adds a lot there.
Daniel is also really foundational in the vocal. So there's some wordless vocals that happen during the B part. And Nick and Daniel, do you want to talk about the recording of that?
Yeah. Dan literally, I can't remember who all was there. It was like one of those things where Dan and I were around late tracking. And I was like, Dan, you want to just try like singing stuff over this? And Dan just like took a one shot through it. And just literally one time, it was those ahs. And then we kind of forgot about it. And then we like showed it to the guys like several sessions later. And then just decided, actually, that is perfect. And let's just like try putting harmonies around it. We might keep it, we might not. And then we stacked probably like 5 or 6 other vocal parts around it, different people in the band singing. But yeah, that original like wordless vocal take was Dan improvising one time without like trying anything else.
Yeah. And it was kind of composed. The part was kind of composed in editing.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I remember it.
Yeah.
Was that we recorded so many vocals, and then I think Nick, you took essentially the best pieces or the most emotive pieces, and then basically wrote the vocal part using the vocals almost as samples, right?
Yeah.
And I think you like cobble together, like there's stuff that I don't remember singing in a certain part of the song that you clearly sampled from another part and put in later.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the joys of recording on our own. Like there are these little moments on the album where it's like, hey, let's just try that. And we had the freedom to do that. And we ended up with some cool stuff. And this is definitely one of those.
Yeah.
Lyrically, this was, I shared last time that a lot of these songs were written in summer 2020, where I was unemployed for 4 or 5 months. My wife was unemployed. It was the middle of the stay-at-home order. And so like, we can't go anywhere, do anything. I can't even distract myself with work. I'm drinking a lot. I'm worried that I'm spending too much on booze because I'm on unemployment. There's so many layers of anxiety going on. And my wife and I, we've been in Denver for the entire time that we've been together since 2011. And there's kind of similar to when Do I Feel at Home Here? This was a song that was like, we basically are free to do anything that we want. We can stay in Denver, we can go. We're a lot of our friends, a lot of our core friendships, we lost like 2 or 3 significant friends who moved to Austin or to Portland or to some other place in that 2020 year because they, for work, or they got sick of Denver or whatever. And this was a song that was basically just like, hey babe, I know that we're unemployed, and on one level we have no prospects in life, but we have all the prospects in the world. Like, I've got you, you've got me. Things are going poorly on a certain level, but as far as like the core of our relationship, like I'm here with you and you're here with me. So where do you want to go? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? Do you want to do whatever? And there's also Jesse's favorite lyric that I've ever written.
He's not wrong.
Is in this song. In the third verse, it's I'm deaf in one ear, so speak for me nice and slow. Fragile, sincere, where do you want to go?
There's a tenderness and a nearness to that feels so. It's so lived in. It's sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, drinking coffee at 6 a.m. while it's still dark outside. Like it immediately transports me to a place. And also another great example of how what the lyrics were intended to. I mean, we talked a little bit in part 1 about how modern culture affects how we consume art and how we engage and appreciate art, and how the moment you put a song out into the world, it's really no longer your song anymore.
Right.
It belongs to anyone who hears it. And this is a great example of what Ben intended, having had conversations with him about the meaning and the heart of this song. The lyric doesn't exactly mean to me what it does to Ben, but it is so profoundly impactful that I don't think Ben cares, and I don't.
That's great.
I would hope he didn't, but what that means to me is different from what it means to Ben, but that doesn't make it any less powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an image of, I'm actually a little bit deaf in my left ear, just from a lot of punk rock shows in high school and in college, and so sometimes I just I also, there's been a dynamic with my wife Kate that she'll say something and then I'll sort of be spaced out and I'll say, can you say that again? And it sort of represented a moment where it was just like, we really need to listen intently to each other. And I almost need to like describe to my partner, like, hey, I struggle to hear you sometimes, so please speak deliberately and slowly. Like, I'm both literally and sort of metaphorically deaf sometimes. And
I need some help.
I need some help. Yeah. And it's like, I really want to see you. I really want to hear you. And we've all in a romantic relationship or a friendship, like, felt the pain of like, I don't really think that you're seeing me right now. I don't really think that you're listening right now. And this was a moment where we both felt so low, but also there was so much potential in front of us of like the lowness of the moment that we were in could potentially slingshot us into changing some things about life, saying yes to things that we wouldn't in other seasons be brave enough to say yes to. And so it feels like I struggle to write love songs, even though I've been married for 11 years. And this felt like the closest to a love song that I could write, even though there's so much bitterness and bittersweetness in it. It was just like, hey babe, I've got you. We've got each other. Even if the rest of the world falls apart, it's like, we're going to have each other's back. And that's like the best definition of love I've ever heard. Whether that's romance or friendship, is just like when our backs are against the wall, we've got each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how love should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then let's move on to I'm Not Sure.
This is the big one.
People
like this song.
People connected with this one, which is cool.
People on the internet like it. So we released 3 singles before the record came out. The first one we released was Do I Feel at Home Here? The second one was I'm Not Sure. The third was I Can't Write It Down, which we talked about on side A. So this is the side B single. This is also the first song that fully shifts into acoustic mode.
Yeah.
The rest of the record is acoustic, is used maybe as a supplement or an accent.
Yeah.
This is the first sort of shift into, we're now entering our acoustic phase. of the record. I'm in my acoustic era. And this to me, also felt like songwriting wise and lyrically, this is probably the most straightforward, vulnerable. This is as close as I've ever gotten to actually describing what depression for me feels like, which is my brain is fuzz. And I know that you have a very important question for me, and you really want like to go over this logistical item, this thing that we need to talk about. But I'm like, can you just ask me later? Like I literally am unable to hold a thought in my head. And so songwriting wise, there was a lot of, it felt like an acoustic sing along. The touchstones for me was probably Elliott Smith and the Beatles.
Yeah.
So Elliott Smith, in that this is the only song that there's a doubled vocal take that I do. That's just two voices singing the melody. Otherwise, if you hear multiple voices, it's like gang vocals or Daniel or Nick or Jesse or Ryan singing harmony. This was the first one where it was like the actual vocal was doubled, which felt very Elliott Smith. That's every song for him.
Yep.
And also structure wise, where it's a pretty song and there's some very Beatlesy sort of parts.
Yeah.
Not only in the bass playing, but in like the guitar playing and even just the little instrumental section before the third verse.
Yeah.
But it felt like the Beatles processed through Elliott Smith, processed through like Owen, processed through like us, right? And so it's just like we in 2020, before we were able to play venue shows because the world was shut down, we just played a lot of acoustic house shows. And we continued that through like 2020, 2021. And so a lot of writing of these songs, and the first time these songs got performed was in an acoustic house show setting. And this was one where we didn't want to stray too far from what it sounded like in the acoustic house show. Now, in the acoustic house shows, Jesse, instead of playing drums, plays guitar. And so this one still has drums and still has like a very kind of driving part. And Daniel wrote a really good like Coldplay-esque lead guitar part. Daniel played banjo on this song too. It's in standard tuning, but capo 2, I'm playing in like an E formation, but it's an F sharp. And just kind of having a capo and playing an E just felt like the song should be what it is, which is just like an acoustic banger.
I think there was a moment early on when we first listened to like the very first phone voice memo recordings of it, where there was almost a sense of like, is this song too tender and too sweet to be a full band song? And then, but kind of that idea of like the carry me, like that line picks up and it's like, there needed to be more than just singer-songwriter. Like the sense of like, hey, someone's with you in this. I think builds throughout the song.
Yeah, it feels very. This was the Small Albums review that made me cry. So Small Albums, who's our favorite music blog publication, whatever. It's a very mysterious entity. It's an
Anton Helium.
An Anton Helium. There's like we don't know the actual person's name who runs it, but they've just been really supportive to our band, and it's kind of the point where like where Small Albums points I follow in like getting into new music, and like so half the new songs that I love, it's like we discovered from Small Albums, but they wrote a review for I'm Not Sure, the single, and it was like it had images of fall and winter, and he or she or they or whoever that wrote it was like it was almost poetry that they wrote.
Prose.
Yeah, it's like prose poetry. And I don't know, like I'm glad that this song has been the one that it seems like a lot of people are adding to playlists and a lot of people are listening to. It's like since we released the single a month and some change ago, it's gotten 20,000 streams, which is more for a single song in a short amount of time than we've ever had.
Mhm.
And so it just, something about it feels right. And that was Daniel's instincts. Daniel's our like playlist guy, and he's like where's the hook? And like he's basically
Where's the hook?
yeah, he's like the hook police. And this was the song that he was like, we need to release this as a single because a bunch of sad emo playlists will add it and love it. And
they did.
Goddamn, he was right.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Small albums, especially. That's a high prestigious honor.
Yes.
Highly prestigious honor.
Yeah.
Small albums. That just a segue. Small albums was a thing when I was in like my freshman year of high school.
They're OG. Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. The lore is that they're from Denver.
That's like some arcane piece of, because I've been following since back then too. And then they took like a hiatus for like a couple years. But yeah, there's like some arcane piece of lore lodged in my brain that they were like Denver based, but I don't know if I just made that up.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. But they're the tiny playlist Tuesdays, the fact that they don't care what is in the popular zeitgeist as far as what other music blogs or publications are covering, and the fact that they will, instead of talking like I think in terms of what band does this sound like? So that's right. I'm not criticizing that sort of music journalism or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I respect about small albums is they will primarily just talk about how the song makes them feel.
It's a fresh take. It always feels like that.
Yes, exactly. Instead of just the trope of like, hey, this sounds like Kara Kara, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just like, yeah, it's fresh, it's different, it's more personal.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah, for sure.
But speaking of personal, back to the album.
Good segue.
Butter smooth.
So we are. Anyone have any closing thoughts on I'm Not Sure?
Oh, the banjo part, we kind of were done recording the song for the most part. And I was like, guys, I hear a banjo part. I don't know if I know how to play it, but let me try. And we were able to get that together kind of as a last minute thing. But
we were all very annoyed because we've been working on this record for 2 years and doing it all ourselves. And Nick and Jesse primarily spending countless hours mixing, going over takes, doing like composing in editing, right? For a lot of, most of these songs have so many stupid guitar parts and like just so much.
So many awesome guitar parts.
Yeah, but like a stupid amount of them. And then Daniel was like, I hear a banjo part. And we had already essentially locked in the mixes. We were like ready to ship it, call it done, send it to Evergroove to get mastered.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't ready.
Clearly.
But he was right to do it.
Yeah, so he jokes, but it's like if you hear that banjo part, you're like, oh yeah, the song isn't the same.
And anytime someone we get a real kick out of anytime someone messages us on Instagram or Twitter and talks specifically about a song of like either how it impacted them or like noticing some stuff. And there's been like 2 or 3 people who have been like, oh, I love the banjo part and I'm not sure. And Daniel feels vindicated every time.
Every time.
The last thing I have to say before I have to go, I have to bounce early.
Yeah.
Is that it was Taylor who runs Swim Into the Sound.
Yeah, love him.
Yeah. Posted this like, he had a semi-viral tweet that was like the emo to alt country pipeline.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that I was thinking about that, and our album is like basically that pipeline.
Yes.
Like from start to finish.
Yeah.
It like takes you through the pipeline.
It starts emo and then ends up like alt country.
Yeah. But the banjo appears on I'm Not Sure for the first time, and then on the next song it appears.
Yes, it's banjo-y too.
Yeah, the only 2 banjo songs are right next to each other, which I just think is kind of fun and funny.
And there's somebody who called us like an alt country emo band basically, Bye, Nick. Nick's got to leave.
Thanks for
Bye.
having us.
Bye.
Good to meet you.
So somebody called us an alt country sort of Pine Grove style emo band. And I was like, you're right for the latter half of the album. Do you want to segue into Smoke Monster now?
Yes. Quick question.
Yes.
Is this a lost reference?
It is a lost reference,
It
my
is.
friend.
Tell the
Thank
story,
you.
man.
This is part of the A Place for Owls lore because whenever we would play this song live, acoustic, again, this is one that found its legs during the acoustic house show era. But Ben would go every time we're tuning, whenever he goes, has anyone here seen the television show Lost? And he would start by telling the deep lore of this song, and it became almost a running joke within our band.
Yes.
That we knew anytime Smoke Monster was going to be played, that Ben was going to do the Smoke Monster spiel.
Yeah.
We ended up, I think we've done this a couple of times where it's like we'll start to kind of riff on it and ask someone in the audience to tell the story because most people at our shows have heard the story enough to be able to retell it.
Yeah.
But it's a fun little piece of APFO lore.
Yeah. Lost is probably my favorite, as imperfect and beautiful as it is. It's probably my favorite television series. I've rewatched it, like 12 times in my adult life, I think. And, obviously the first and the second season are perfect. And then there's beautiful things about the latter seasons, but it's one of those like J.J. Abrams starts a thing. He asks a question well and doesn't answer the question well.
Correct.
So we nerd out about the show Lost. Like actually Daniel and I, when we were roommates in college, and we were dating two girls that were not our now wives, like our college girlfriends or whatever. We would watch Lost. Like we would have Lost parties.
Yeah, and it was like when it was on at the time. And you'd have to wait a week for the next episode.
Yeah, so I caught up. Was the third season on the air or fourth season?
That sounds. It was early on.
Yeah,
and it was a lot of like you'd wait the week and then you'd have all these theories about what was happening. And,
Yes, yeah. And so I remember when Daniel and I worked together at an office job, we would text each other screenshots or email each other screenshots of like the wall in the hatch that we saw for the first time, and
theories and conspiracies,
going through like what the graffiti means. And so Lost is just a show that has a lot of not only nostalgia, but it's been with me through most things, and it's almost become like a mythic in the same way that you would look at Greek myths or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever as these foundational stories that teach us something about humanity. Lost is like in that category for me, even though there's criticisms to be lobbed at the show. But late in the season, they do Saeed dirty, where Saeed gets taken over by the smoke. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Sure, that's been off the air for
20 years. Yeah. But
it's on Hulu if you haven't seen it
yeah,
yet.
exactly. It's on
podcast.
Hulu. Get it.
Watch 121 episodes.
Yeah, watch the first season, and if you like that, you can continue on. So Saeed, he's one of my favorite characters, but the smoke monster takes him over, and the way that the smoke monster takes him over is Saeed doesn't have emotion anymore. He's like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel good. I don't feel bad. I feel nothing. Which is sometimes the way that depression sort of manifests for me. And an interesting thing happens with Saeed is that he actually loses his moral compass because he doesn't have feelings anymore. And so it just became this really interesting idea of like, when I stop feeling feelings and feeling good when I do good things and feeling bad when I do bad things, I kind of lose my sense of right and wrong. Because it's basically you lose your empathy. It's like you can make someone else suffer. And if that doesn't make you feel bad or like something is wrong, then you will continue to, without remorse, make other people suffer, right? It's kind of like you become a sociopath when you lose your sense of empathetic connection to other people. And so that's the metaphor. What actually happened was I was just a big, just giant jerk to my wife, and essentially like made her, I deeply hurt her feelings. And she was so sick of me being a big dick that like she left and went grocery shopping, and she was like, I just need some space. And I felt so bad, rightly so, because I had done a bad thing. I had been really mean to someone who is consistently kind to me. And even if she was mean to me first, like it doesn't justify like me being mean, right? In the way that I was. So I wrote that song in a very quick, in like a half an hour, it came together. And I played it for my wife when she got home from the grocery store by way of apology. And it worked. She forgave me. And, you know, like I also have sort of viewed this song as a reminder that like sometimes when I get depressed, I let that make me punchy and mean and irritable and angry. And I let that make me, I let that sort of like, I use that as a justification sometimes of like, I'm being a dick to other people, but like I'm hurting so bad internally that like, I'm like, that's okay on some level. And it's like, it's not okay. You can, a person has the capacity to still feel really bad inside and still choose kindness and gentleness with others. And I know that that's like hard to maybe always live up to all the time, but like that's definitely what that song means. Now, as far as like the structure, it's in standard tuning. It's capoed on 6. It's a stupid high capo. So it's in F sharp as well, but instead of capoing 2 playing in E, it's capo 6 playing in C. And it does feel very much like a folk song. Some big touchstones were bands like Pine Grove, Phoebe Bridgers, especially early Phoebe Bridgers.
Listen to Chinese Satellite back to back with this song and see if you see any connection there.
I know. I essentially kind of intentionally, unintentionally lifted the structure of the verse, not the melody, but the structure of the verse for Chinese Satellite by Phoebe Bridgers. And we're like big proponents of like, you actually like should borrow from good art. That's the way that good art has been made throughout history. Now, we're not blatantly ripping off the melody line or whatever. And, you know, a lot of this is subconscious and maybe unintentional of just what you ingest.
We're steeped in a lot of these songs.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
But the reality is that just because your chord progression sounds almost exactly like the chord progression of another song that you like doesn't mean that you should scrap that song and never play it for somebody else. It's like, it's one of my favorite songs of ours, and it feels so A Place for Owls, but it definitely is very heavily influenced by Phoebe Bridgers, Pine Grove, a lot of classic folk stuff that I love. And then my favorite part about the song is all the little touches. So there's like ghost ooze, like singing high that happen in the verse and in the chorus. There's these moments of like gang vocal, but like gentle gang vocals singing a wordless melody line over the guitar solo in the middle. And then it almost becomes like total, it shifts pretty hard from like alt country sort of stuff into like just pop punk. There's like the big loud chorus at the end is like a lot of octave lead over top of each other. And it feels like this is the folky but loud version of us. And it definitely is, it is not original as far as the arrangement or even the songwriting style by any means, but it's still like, it's one of those where like it's reminds you of some of your favorite songs while still having something personal. I'm not even going to say original or fresh because it's not necessary. That's not what we were striving for, but it says something very personal while still being like steeped in here's the alt country emo stuff that you love.
Yeah, and this is one too where I think that idea of like layers or different meaning really comes out because it is such a specific song for Ben of like, hey, this was this exact moment in time where I got in a fight and I wrote this as an apology. It's so specific, but if you zoom out, it does wrestle with the idea of like these hateful or bad or harmful things come out of me without trying. So then like where does goodness come from? Like is that built in with me? Does that come from outside of me? And that line of like, can I clean out my heart myself? I just love that this song wrestles with that idea of like, I know where bad stuff comes from, but like where does good come from?
Right. And there's a dude who did a TikTok review of our record. He talked about how some of his favorite emo wrestles with, am I a moral person? Am I a good person? And some really, really dark and sad emo is like, you go, no, I don't think I am. And then you can almost like revel in that. Like some of those early 2000s emo records were like, we're just going to like revel in that I'm not a good guy. You know, I'm not your friend. You know, like that sort of darkness of like, I don't think I'm a good person. But it's just like, you got to look at the mirror of how you, and be self-aware enough to realize that we all do stuff that harms each other. And how do we deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make that right?
And it does feature, speaking of borrowing, lifting things from artists that we care about and love. Early Counting Crows is a huge influence on all of us as a band. Adam Duritz as a songwriter, just their arrangements, their recording process. There's a lot of really good, beautiful stuff there to draw from. And the closing track, which this was originally, here's a fun note, this was originally the closing track for the album.
Right.
And we had a similar thought of the closing track on August and Everything After has this hand like pump organ kind of drone that starts the track A Murder of One at the end of that record, and that felt apropos for what we were doing. And so we recorded a similar thing where we took that kind of droning pump organ harmonium sound, and that lives just kind of tucked underneath everything for the entire song.
Right. Both songs are also in F sharp.
They're also both
so
in F sharp.
You can put them on a playlist and play them back to back.
Yeah, you sure could.
Feels pretty flawless.
You sure could. But that was, you know, I know certainly as a writer, I've been pretty heavily influenced by those guys. And
Crows is big.
Yeah, and so that felt like a fun little like tip of the cap to one of our all time favorite records.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. And then we move on to the final track.
We made it.
Yeah.
We're here. We did it.
Yeah. So Is It Love?
Yeah.
Tell me about the final track.
So, Is It Love feels like a sequel to a couple songs from our acoustic EP that we did back in 2020. There's a song on the EP called Is It Love? Or no, This Is Love. The EP song is This Is Love. The LP song is It Love?
There it is.
Yes. So, but which is weird because This Is Love actually feels more like a question of like what the situation that I'm describing in the song does not feel like love. But is it love? Even though it's posed as a question, because it's is it love that rebuilds us all is the line that we say a number of times in this song. And I just think the answer has got to be emphatically yes. Like there's so many pieces of me that are like fall apart and are broken, whether that's from like shitty experiences in childhood or disappointments in life and career. And like, why am I not more financially secure? And good God, why am I still depressed pretty constantly? Like what's like all that. The thing that has felt mending and healing is love. And I don't just mean romantic love, even though it's like I'm in a very stable romantic relationship, which is very healing. But the fact that like I've got good friends that surround me, and that like love as like just that that mutual commitment to each other for each other's good, even when it's inconvenient. Like love is not just that positive feeling that you feel. It's love is showing up on moving day, and love is showing up when people are difficult to love. That's when love, at least to me, feels the most authentic.
And I mean, I would even add that even the good things in life, the things that you enjoy, like if there isn't a string or a sense of like love ties this together, it's so much less good. Like even making these songs and being in this band, I mean, if we didn't care about each other and like have some sense of unity in that I wouldn't enjoy it.
No. And it's like you can play video games by yourself or you can read a book by yourself, but actually that gets cashed in when you meet somebody else that loves that same book or that same video game, and you talk about it. So all the best, even though we do a lot internally and solo, like all the best things in life happen in relationship and in community. And that's probably the deepest spiritual truth I've ever come across, right? So this is a song that was heavily influenced by the poetry of Rumi. So Dissolver earlier on the record is a straight verbatim a Rumi poem. This is one where it's like more sort of inspired by Rumi and taking some of the concepts and some of the images of like of water stuck in a well, and it gets stale. Water gets stale if it doesn't move. How do we refresh it? Well, we send it to the ocean. And the ocean in Rumi is both a metaphor for the universe and God and how big we all are together. And Rumi talks about how it's joyful for a drop of water to be annihilated in the ocean because it becomes who it truly is. The drop becomes the ocean. The ocean is the drop, right? And so this is like if there's been some songs that maybe say things a little simply and directly, this was the one where we get super pretentious and poetic again but it is a little straightforward. It's like when my words become a tangle in which I'm knotted up, when you can't stand my presence because I'm feeling stuck, when I've got a fever that won't let up, like when I've got a sickness that won't let up. It's like it's an actual feeling that I have felt multiple times of like my depression and my sort of angst is so acute on me that I'm insufferable to be around. People just don't want to actually be in my presence, is at least what I internally sort of feel. Now, I do have people that love me and do want to be around me, but I also like my presence is costly for them. It's painful to be around me in those times when I'm really feeling rough. But it's in a moment like that, it's like, it's love. It's the commitment of somebody else to me in a way that like loves when it's costly, that actually like feels like it rebuilds me if I've been broken down. Right. And so it's a sequel to This Is Love, because This Is Love, even though it's phrased as a statement, it's actually more of a question of like, I don't know if this is actually love, but this is like kind of like this is actually
phrased
love.
as a question, but it's really more of a statement.
It is very much a rhetorical question.
It's also a sequel to Last Night I Had a Dream, which is the last track on our acoustic EP that has also gotten a lot of traction online on Spotify of people listening to it. In that, we recorded Last Night I Had a Dream live around one microphone, me playing electric guitar, but we just tracked it live. This was another experience of that where this was probably our 7th take, maybe 5th or 7th take.
Oh, I think it was closer to 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
Because as is, live recording is such an interesting thing because you want the warts, you want it to feel and sound live, but you don't want any one part to sound bad. Right. So I want it to be just weird enough to where it's like, oh, that's endearing. They did it live, and not be like, that person isn't singing in key.
Right.
Right. And so there's a number of those first takes. It was, 3 of the 5 of us would crush it, and the other 2 would be like, I didn't actually love what I did there. We were also writing some of those harmonies on the fly. Yeah. So it was like, I think it was the 4th take before we actually had the harmonies that we stuck with.
Yeah.
Which is a blessing and a curse in a band like ours, where it's like everybody sings, everybody has an idea of what they want to do, and then you have to kind of figure out what does the song actually need. So I think it was probably the fourth take where we actually had the parts, and from there it was just, all right, let's get it. Let's get the actual thing.
And we also had to experiment with, it's one mic, but some of us sing louder than others. So we actually had to experiment a fair amount of like, hey, Nick, because he's singing, he's belting the melody an octave up, he actually needs to stand about 50 paces away from the mic.
Like genuinely, he was 30 feet from the microphone.
Yes, yeah.
And that's it. That is an interesting production detail of like, you can't mix it. You can't mix the vocals.
So you kind of mix it live.
Yeah, you have to mix it live.
Standing.
Yeah, you have to mix yourself, which is the Beatles have pretty cool stories about doing a very similar thing, about like finding their voices and how to do a very similar thing.
Yeah. I also love the recording of this song because it felt spiritual in the sense that like there's 5 people singing in unison in a room. And, you know, the only context I have for that is really like growing up in church, of like the choir and the congregation, like all together sort of singing in unison. And it's just like, there's this really interesting, intangible thing that happens where all of your emotional states and even your breathing and your heartbeats start to like line up with each other. And even though it's an emotive song, and we definitely tried to be as emotive as possible, but I'm used to, like, if I'm recording a vocal take, I'll be emotive by myself, staring at the microphone, maybe hearing Nick or Jesse's voice in my ear as like the producer. But this was a moment where it's like we're all 5 tearing up and choking up, and like just the sense of connection that we felt. Not only that, because you don't always feel the connection that you want. This was a moment where I was like, we're not only singing about it's love that rebuilds us all, but it was a moment. It felt, it's corny as hell, but like it was a moment of love.
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
Yes.
And, you know, in terms of writing the song, Ben had written the first part and sent it out as a voice memo and sent the poem kind of that inspired it. And it was like really pretty and really short. And we were kind of like, what do we do with this? And I listened back 2 or 3 times, and I pitched the idea of like, guys, I think this is a yelly gang vocal outro. And it felt really weird based on the first part that was written. But I have a very vivid memory of, we have a space, well, we don't have it anymore, but a beloved space we called the Shed, which was just the garage at my old house. And it's like non-insulated cement floor, just small little garage space. And I went out at about 5:30 in the morning. That's like my songwriting time. Went out to the garage because the kids are still asleep and the house is quiet, and just sat down with the poem and with the voice memo and just kept working on this idea until I could send it out to the band of like, I think this is the outro to the song. So that was like a fun collaboration for the end of that.
And songwriting wise, up until this point, like Daniel had been, he would do little touches. Like, I'm not sure, originally the chorus ended with, do you know something? And Daniel was like, you know what that should be is, do you know something I don't? And so that's been Daniel's sort of writing of like, he'll write a chorus or like a little just piece. This was probably the most substantive thing that you've written. Like that whole bridge essentially at the end, the breathe in so deeply that you know, and there's love that rebuilds us all, was all Daniel. And so that felt right because the song is about community, and it felt right to essentially be a 50-50 songwriting piece of it, kind of for the first time in our band. This was also, Jesse alluded to this, but this was an 11th hour edition. We were done with the record for months, as far as at least recording and tracking. It was still being mixed, but this was a song that I wrote. I'm like, hey, I wrote it, and Daniel wrote the B part to it. And I think this is the closer. This has to be the closer, right? Because it felt like last night I had a dream, in that like we could just do it live. Like we don't have to record it and track our parts individually. It's like we can just do it all live together. And so it felt fresh when we were recording it because again, like Jesse said, we had just written it, the song, and we were composing vocal parts live in the studio. And so by the time it actually clicked and we got it, and it was like, was it late at night or early in the morning, Jesse?
For Is It Love?
Yes.
Was it
Yeah.
That was a Saturday morning.
At like 6 a.m. or something like that.
Not quite that. No, it was like 10 or 11.
Well, 10 or 11 feels early to me.
That's
so.
true.
Yeah.
It may as well be 6 a.m.
Right. Yeah. Anyways, it made sense, even though I think I re-listen to the record sometimes and I'm like, oh, there's a jump, not only in key change from F sharp to C, but there's also a jump in like how it feels. Like it definitely, there's a shift from the produced but still raw sound of like I'm Not Sure and Smoke Monster to like this is clearly live. And so part of me was like, does that work? But I really think it does. And the fact that this song is in C and the first two songs on the record are in C, and the other last minute addition to the album was Press Start, the first track, which is the sort of 8-bit chiptune combination of the melody of Book and the melody of Is It Love. So I don't know. It tied it together. It made the album feel cohesive.
Yeah, and it is.
Because it's a very seamless repeat.
Say again.
It's a very seamless repeat.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was the hope. Is I mean, we talked about this in part 1, but that it allows for the seamless loop, but it also carries on and I think informs and contextualizes the rest of the album. So not only is it the parting thought, but if you do listen on repeat, you're starting with that in mind. And so instead of having to reflect on what did I just listen to and how can I filter it through this lens, what you get is you hear this and then you go through and listen to the album again. And I think it fills in gaps in a really cool way. And we like the idea of paying homage to the first to the EP by ending the albums in a similar way.
That's right.
That's always cool. It's like telling a separate story with like the different like compositionally, like, oh, these tell a story in a similar way. Whether it's a whole different story, but
Yeah.
it's still yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Me Without You is a big band for me, and they would often write the next album by starting with the previous album. Like Aaron from Me Without You would take a lyric, like he would take the first line of a song that he had already written and then use that as the first line for his like next song. So there was a sense of, and he would blatantly, so it'd be like Nice and Blue Part 1. Well, it would just be Nice and Blue. And then the next record would be Nice and Blue Part 2, right? And so he did it pretty openly and blatantly. And I don't know, I really respect that of like almost treating your own songs as referencing back. It's kind of like world building where like you'll read, I don't know, this is a dumb example, but you'll read a Brandon Sanderson book and then you'll read a whole other Brandon Sanderson book and you realize, oh, this is all kind of in the same world. Like this is interacting with each other, and kind of treating songwriting as world building, as like you'll pick up melodies or lyrics that we just straight reuse or call back to or reference back to. And that just not only personally, because I songwrite not only because I think the songs are good and I want other people to hear them and then go, good job, Ben, you wrote a really great song. But like,
You do want that.
Yeah, I do want that. But like, I also write as a form of processing and therapy, and like, here's what I'm going through, and I need to look back. One of the reasons why I love re-singing my old songs, even songs that I wrote before A Place for Owls and that will never get recorded because they're like 15 years old or whatever at this point. I love remembering where I was and what I needed to say in that moment and seeing growth that's happened. Cause you sometimes get stuck of like, I'm always going to do the shitty things that I do and I'm never going to grow and I'm always going to be stuck in the same sort of feedback loop. But like referencing back to like old journal entries or old songs or whatever, where you're just like, I have grown a lot and there's so much to be thankful for. That's like part of why doing a callback in a lyric or a recording aesthetic or whatever just felt nice for us.
I don't remember where I heard it exactly, the context, but the idea of like a shared musical DNA, I really like that phrase of just like, it's not, you're not ripping anything off or plagiarizing, but there is a strand or a thread that kind of connects everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's just creating, like you said, like the lore almost. Yeah. Whether you've also like you've included Rumi in your lore now. Right. Like that's like canon to the Place for Owls lore is now all of that is essential reading to be in a Place for Owls.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Basically, and it kind of like that's what Me Without You felt like for me is like. In order to get what Aaron Weiss is talking about, it's like I kind of need to actually go back to the source material and read Rumi. And that he's my favorite poet now, even though it's like there's hundreds of years of distance between us. And, I grew up Christian and he grew up Muslim. And like there's just like so much that should sort of separate me from Rumi. But I'm like, you're talking about something deeply human. And this is just like, I don't know. So it felt like I got into Rumi because of Me Without You lore. And so if somebody who like gets into our band and then starts reading Rumi, that's going to make me so flippin' happy. I'm just going to be pleased as punch that someone gets into good shit. Well, and that's how we feel about other bands that we like. Maybe bands that are like not necessarily the most popular zeitgeist bands, but ones that we grew up listening to. And it's just like we talk about bands we love all the time in the same way that we're just like, we want you to be into this stuff because it's so good. And it's a part of the world building. It's a part of the lore,
Yeah, I mean, and with this, the 2-part of the episode, you've referenced plenty of bands and like things, especially, but like essentially, if you don't listen to Jimmy Eat World and you don't listen to Me Without You, you're not really going to understand the lore of a Place for Owls.
Right, yeah, totally.
But you still might enjoy the content. It's like, you're saying, hey, I know you didn't offer me this torch, but I am going to take it and I'm going to bear it. That's right. Don't worry.
That's beautifully put.
So well put. Yeah.
So it brings me deep sadness to think that for a Place for Owls to continue, Me Without You must end. I don't know.
It's not.
I love our band. I don't know if I would make that trade given.
I know. I would rather have no Place for Owls and have Me Without You, to be 100% honest with you. But the fact that they announced their farewell tour in 2020.
Yeah.
And that was the first year that we started sort of actually getting traction and doing stuff together as a band. And so for Me Without You being my favorite band of all time, it definitely felt like it did create more urgency of like, hey, this monumental band that has been a force of nature for 20 years or whatever, like, not that we're going to be the torchbearer, but like kind of there's I think probably 100 bands in the world who feel that same sort of like ownership over Me Without You, who are just like, we're not exactly them. We're not a carbon copy, but like, we're going to take that sense of spiritual urgency and shared community and heavy but beautiful, thoughtful, folky but heavy. Like, we're going to try to do that. And I very much feel like I want to take that torch for us. Not that we'll ever aspire to be as like perfect as that band, but it is definitely them saying farewell. And I think creates some urgency for me to be like, we got to put out records. We got to tour. We got to do this,
Yeah. Attempt to if not fill the gap for other people, in some way fill the gap for
That's right.
yourself. Be your own favorite band.
That's right. And we
That's what you
definitely
gotta
are.
do.
We like joke of, is it narcissistic to like really just love your own music and want to straight up put your record on like you would put on a Jimmy Eat World record?
I mean, I think we fall firmly into that camp of make the music you want to hear.
That's right.
Yes.
And in that way, I think it's good to like your art.
That's right.
I feel no shame in really enjoying our music.
Yes.
So it's like, say you made one size fits all clothes, right?
Right.
And you didn't wear them. That'd be absurd. It's like, why would you sell them?
Yeah,
then?
that's right. On a certain level, the artist has to find their own art beautiful. And there's, and you're also, when you're creating art, you're also tapping into something bigger than yourself. You're like, this art, in a sense, came from me, but it also came from outside of me. You know, you'll hear songwriters talk about like, well, this song felt like it just got dropped from the universe onto my lap, right? And so on a certain level, when you appreciate your own art, you're also appreciating the beauty of the world and the beauty of like what it is to be alive. And so it doesn't quite feel so narcissistic or maybe self-absorbed and self-obsessed, but there's definitely a little bit of like anxiety. Even I noticed internally as we were talking about some of these songs, that sort of imposter syndrome, self-doubt or whatever pops up big time of like, I'm talking like I even know what the fuck I'm talking about, or like that like anybody would want to listen to this. But it is just like, well, I still, even when I feel self-conscious about my own self, it's like, I know that the art that we create together, I want to listen to it and I think it's good. And I think I want to share it as widely as possible. So it's definitely a weird mix.
Yeah, it's always a mixed bag. Having art that is public and then consuming your own art, being a consumer of your own product, I guess, to make that as, I guess, sterile as possible. I could have explained it, consuming your own product,
Right.
but nonetheless, yeah. But like I've seen plenty of bands or like artists that will post their 5x5 and their own band is in there, and it's like nice.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, good. You better, because most people end up like releasing something and being like, oh, I'm never gonna listen to that again. Like those songs are great, it's fantastic, but I heard them all enough before I put them out. Like I know they're good.
Yeah.
But be able to come back to it, have longevity as the creator, it's good.
Yeah. And it's like on a certain level, if you don't love yourself, I mean, that's the cliche, right? Is like that learning to sort of love yourself is sort of how you learn to let other people love you too. And obviously that's balanced with, I'm not a perfect person. I would strike that copyright. No.
Wow.
Music
Ben
Mondays
closet
taking off of YouTube.
Hoobastank fan
I know,
over here.
Yeah, no, but like the fact that like nobody does, like I can love myself and still accurately see the ways that I need to grow in the ways that I sometimes harm other people. And that's kind of like, you see your own art as like, I love this, but I also see the warts, but like, I love this and I do want to listen to it and I want other people to listen to it. I want to play these songs. I'm still at the point where I'm like, the songs from our first LP, you know, this, what we're talking about, I just desperately want to play them in front of other people. Like, I still have that urgency to like, I have a lot of fun playing these songs and I get into the emotion and I just hope that I never lose that. I hope I never get sick of the songs, you know?
Yeah, I hope you don't either. And with time, there's also the fact of you're all going to grow as artists, and these songs, even though they're published, they still are going to grow. You're still going to change them up when they start to get boring. Mix them in with the new stuff when that comes along, things like that. Because I saw Queen Moo the other day. I don't know if y'all know who Queen Moo is. Glam rock band from Connecticut. Their self-titled album came out in 2015, right? Okay. So I saw them. They've got 4 albums now. They opened with like 3 or 4 of their self-titled songs, which, I mean, 2015 is not too long, but in the DIY scene,
It's a long
that's a
time.
long time. Especially, and so the lead singer, Queen Moo, was in a couple other bands before that. Most notably, Sorority Noise.
Oh, sure.
But so, yeah, those songs, they just, they changed it up. They're fresh, they're new. They still sounded like the same song, but they're like, the riffs are a little different. There's a different energy because it's like, we're playing the song and it's almost reached the point where we're covering our own
That's
song.
right. Yeah, there's that Lucy Dacus line of in 5 years, I hope these songs feel like covers.
Yeah.
And it's like, I 100% am looking forward to when maybe the original arrangement that we have for some of these songs feels a little stale to us, and we just totally rearrange it and treat it like a cover where we'll add something fresh to it. And that's also for the fan who maybe they've heard that song 150 times because they've worn out that record. That's also fresh to them too.
Yeah. And the moment you brought that up, I perked up and Ben started smiling because I know that he knows this quote is coming, but tying it back to Adam Duritz and Counting Crows, he mentions, you spend enough time with a song, even if you recorded it one way, you play it on the road enough, you spend enough time with a song, you learn how it wants to be played.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think we try to unlock that as early as we can, but then to your point, a lot of times it's like you play it for 2 years, and we played a lot of the songs that are on the acoustic EP have full band rippers.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've got versions of some of those songs that feel completely different from their acoustic counterparts, and similarly, we've played a lot of the huge songs on the LP in small acoustic settings, and they translate beautifully. And that, to me, again, color me narcissistic, whatever, that's the mark of a good song.
Mm-hmm.
If the song can transcend the delivery, or it's adaptable and able to kind of shapeshift into the right context for whatever your setting is, like that to me speaks to the strength of the song. And that's a thing that I think we've strived for as a band.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we mentioned it in part 1, but that's the only reason that acoustic EP even happened, is we took these big full band songs and we're like, well, let's see how they play acoustic. And it turns out some of them were actually even better acoustic, but sometimes it's still really fun to play the absolutely ripping speed train version of Last Night I Had a Dream
Right.
with the full band.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's just the analog equivalent of like remixing your own song.
That's right.
Yeah, totally.
Which I know from personal experience, I've taken like full instrument, like full acapellas of a track, and I'm like, I'm gonna put it to a different beat and just see how it goes. And then like, well, I like this beat more. It's on to this song now.
Yes.
And then re-recorded it with a little bit of a different cadence, make it fit to the beat. And then it's like, all right, I think this is better.
Yes.
But it is like the mark of a good song if it can hold up in any form while still remaining like, oh, this is supposed to be this song,
That's right.
So do we have any closing thoughts on your self-titled album?
Well, I mean, I just want to say this has been such a cool experience for us, and thank you for asking like really, really thoughtful questions, and clearly like having you as a creator too, being able to relate to some of the stuff that were processed. Like, I don't know, I just really appreciate how you've gone about this and just given us the opportunity. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's such a fun experience to have people care about your art and want to hear like, why is this valuable to you? What makes this meaningful to you? What was your process? How did you arrive at that decision? Like, this is it's a thing. I seek this stuff out whenever I find an album or an artist that I love. I want to just saturate myself in everything that went into the making of that record.
Yeah.
And so you honor us by asking us to do that same.
And it feels very much like watching the special features of a movie that you really love or something. It's
Directors
just,
like with the director commentary.
Yeah,
going,
exactly. Yeah. Like, so I love this stuff. So thanks for doing it.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, that's the whole goal of this podcast is supposed to be like the special features for albums and EPs. Just because like the smaller artists, don't always get the opportunity to do a breakdown like this, because there's not smaller outlets doing the same thing. But here at Music Mondays, which this originally was a different podcast, but I stopped doing this format on my own podcast, and now I do it here on Music Mondays. But yeah, so thank y'all for also talking at length. We got two-parter. We got almost 3 hours of audio to edit through.
I hope that's okay.
Which 3 hours to talk about what took almost over 2 years, right? Almost, yeah. 3 hours to talk about that. That's nothing, That was probably shorter than it needed to be. You probably have more to say. I'm sure if we went back, there's even more to say.
Yeah, thank you. I think
thank
I
y'all.
think the only sort of final thought I'll say is we've just been really grateful for the folks that have messaged and emailed and talked to us after shows about the fact that this, even though the songs feel very specific to me and very specific to us, there's been a couple folks that have talked to us after shows or sent messages that are like, this sort of unlocked a piece of my brain, and it's almost like someone took my own sort of diary entries and like put it out there. So that there's just been some really gratifying sense of resonance with others. And we're just so glad. That's what happened with our favorite records when we were growing up. And it's also been, it's not a bunch of people, but there's been like 5 or 10 or 15 people who've been like, hey, A Place for Owls, LP1, like that's on my album of the year list.
Which is insane.
Insane. Really is. And we're like, it's like we're seeing their list, and it's like Barty's Strange and Cara Cara and Gang of Youth and some of the best records that we love that came out this year. And they're like, yeah, number 4, A Place for Owls. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. So, and I know that is, you can't sort of get trapped in just maybe wanting that more of like, oh, I want acclaim and, critical ambitions or whatever. But it's just the fact that there's been some people out there, strangers who we've never met, who are like, this is one of my favorite records of the year. That's just so flippin'
wild.
So cool. And I never want to lose that feeling of gratitude. And maybe the good side of imposter syndrome is like, yeah, maybe on a certain level, I don't deserve to be here, but like how cool that I am here on somebody's best of the year list. So, yeah, we just appreciate that, the response to the record.
It is well deserved.
Yeah, thank you.
Well deserved indeed. Y'all did a great goddamn
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you so much.
That means so much.
Truly, yeah. Because like a lot of good music came out this year.
100%.
But your album is one of the good ones.
Thank you.
All right. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say while you have the audience's attention?
If you are in Denver, check out our Twitter and our website to find out where we're playing live. We're dreaming and scheming with a couple of our friends that are in other bands to do some touring next year. And so we would love to see you if we're like in your city. we all know for musicians that right now feels like a really hard time to tour. And there's a lot of folks rightly talking about how taxing and expensive the sort of tour life is. So not only it would mean the world to us if like you see that we're playing in your town or whatever, please come see us, but do that for every band that you love. Like if a band that you love is in your city, please, for the love of God, go and see them live and buy their record.
Take a couple friends with you.
Take a couple friends with you, even if they're marginally like, I've never heard of this band before. Like live music is essentially at this point in the music industry, it's the only way that musicians are even able to make money doing this sort of stuff. And selling merch is the only way that they even break even and maybe make a profit on tour. And so go see your favorite band, go see them live. Don't pay $800 to go see Blink. Pay $20 to go see a small, I mean, maybe you can if you want to and you have that money, go pay $800 to see Blink. But like, go see a band that you showing up and singing along and buying a hoodie and a vinyl record, that will mean the world to them and mean that it's financially possible for them to keep making music. So please do that, not only for us, but for others.
Absolutely. And at house shows,
yes,
feel free to give more than $5. Like,
yes.
If it's a $5 door at a house show, you can give more.
100%.
You know, if it's at like a bar or something, you know, buy merch for sure. But, you know, if it's, just go out to local shows, do that shit.
Yes.
Absolutely. Touring bands, see them.
Yes.
Definitely. Essential. Touring is, very, very expensive.
Yes.
I haven't toured since like 2017, and it was expensive then. Inflation's only gotten worse.
But if somebody's choosing to do that as a way to get their music in front of other people, I think it's so cool when people show up for that stuff and have a culture that like we love seeing small bands play live. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank y'all for being here.
Yeah, thank you, my friend.
Thank y'all
It's
for
been awesome.
being on
Yes, thank you
the
so much.
Breakdown on Music Mondays podcast. I have been your host. I realized that I have not told anyone on the call how to say my name. I have a very difficult name to say. I've been your host, Ivahka Glass. Thank you, A Place for Owls.
Thank you, Ivahka.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We can hit stop now.
Woo!
That's great, man. Thank you.